Let me tell you what my deep research and basically vision is.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is.
I'm not telling you nothing.
The aliens won't let it happen.
Happening now, breaking.
Bernie Sanders is angry.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
What are the tips? Give me some tips on how to work with Wes Anderson.
Be ready to speak very fast and very clearly, because that's definitely one key thing.
I will only tell the truth.
Until you and 6 kids you barely know in wet bathing suits have surrounded 9 chimpanzees outside of a Wendy's. You probably really don't know yourself, okay?
Yep. And we back.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to your new favorite podcast and the best in political, sports, and paranormal news coverage. I'm your host, Wes Anderson, and this is In the Shed. This is episode 51, so whether you're back for more or finding us for the first time this week, hey, thanks for tuning in. It's early Friday morning, September 16th, and I'm in a shed in the backyard of my home in Alabama. Also, I can hang out with you tools and talk about the latest headlines, stories, and rumors in the world of politics, sports, and the paranormal. Good morning, my tools. Good morning. Happy Friday. I hope that your week has gone well. I hope that you're having a good time. I got to attend something this last week at which I had a very good time. I went to a concert. Yeah. I went to my first concert in probably half a dozen years. I don't get out much, my babies. My wife bought tickets for her and I to go to a concert together over at the Vinyl Music Hall in Pensacola, Florida. And it was an opportunity to see one of my favorite musical artists, a gentleman by the name of Modest Yahoo. That's right, Grammy-nominated Jewish reggae star himself, beatboxing wonder, Modest Yahoo. And the tickets were actually an early birthday present for me. I have a birthday coming up next month. But this is one of my favorite musical artists of all time, along with Bob Marley and Tupac, neither of whom are still alive. So the opportunity to go to a Modest Yahoo concert not very far from my home was a wonderful opportunity I did not want to pass up. And one thing about me is I'm not really big on the whole celebrity thing, okay? I've met quote-unquote famous people before, and I like to have a normal conversation with those folks. I'll be like, hey, what did you have for breakfast this morning? How did you sleep last night? Beautiful weather, isn't it? I just make conversation because these people are just people at the end of the day. I'm not impressed by fame, by celebrity. However, in this instance, I really, really wanted to go to the VIP meet and greet. So the wife and I got tickets for the VIP meet and greet. We're standing out front of the venue waiting for our opportunity to go in. And there's only like 5 of us, okay? Once the concert started, the venue was packed from the stage all the way back to the door up in the balcony. But there was only 5 of us there for the VIP experience. And so we're all standing out there waiting our chance to go in. And we're making conversation, we're talking about our favorite songs, all this different stuff. And I asked one of the guys, I'm like, so where are you from? And he says, oh, it's a small town about 35 minutes from here. Well, hey, I live in a small town about 35 minutes from there too. So I say, really, where are you from? Would you believe he's from one town over from me? And so I tell him where I'm from, and then the guy next to us says, no way. And he's from a town, one town over in the other direction. So 4 out of the 5 people that came over to this Modest Yahoo concert and paid for the VIP experience. We were all from like within 10 miles of each other over here in the middle of nowhere in Alabama, which is pretty funny to me. But I got to do the meet and greet. We got to go inside. They were doing sound check, Modest Yahoo and his band. And we got to see sound check. We were the only ones there in the venue with the band and the folks that were working at the bar and the sound people. And then after he finished his sound check, the dude came off the stage and he walked over to each and every one of us and was so kind and so personable and so patient and so very normal, and just had conversation with us, asked us where we were from, what songs we would like to be added to the set list for the evening, what our favorite album was, talked to us about family, just very, very kind. Very kind person was Modest Yahoo. Sometimes you meet your favorite artist or your favorite athlete or celebrity, and it turns out that in real life they are jerks. So glad that was not my experience at this concert. I have a journal. I brought this journal with me. I have this journal that I've had for about 12 years. And I got this journal when I was working in the inner city. And I was working with kids who had really rough home lives for the most part. Kids who were in single-parent homes, kids who had one parent in jail, kids who were being raised by grandparents, kids whose older siblings were in gangs, a neighborhood that was overrun by drugs and violence and poverty, overwhelming poverty. And I got this journal back then. And the first thing that I entered into this journal was lyrics from the Modest Yahoo song, One Day. And the lyrics I entered go like this: all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more, and we don't want war, and our children will play one day. Very inspirational song. Love the lyrics, love the message, love the meaning. And the reason why that was the first thing I put in this journal is because at the time that I had gotten this journal, one of the young kids that I worked with, probably about 7 or 8 years old at the time, had an older brother, a half-brother, that no longer lived at home, but that was part of his family, who died tragically in a gang-related shooting. So I was working with this group of kids, and this kid just had this thing happen, and I'm in this neighborhood, and I'm trying to make a difference and to do some good and to spread some light. And this young child at 7 or 8 years old is having to deal with this tragedy in his family, and with unspeakable and unbearable hurt and grief and pain and confusion. So I hear the Modest Yahoo song, One Day. And those lyrics are the first thing I put in this journal. So I took this journal from this important time in my life when I was going through this stuff, serving in this neighborhood, trying to make a difference. And I took it with me to the concert, to the meet and greet. And Modest Yahoo looked over it, and he read it, and he listened to me tell him what this song meant to me and why I had entered this in the journal at this time. And I just asked him to sign it. So he went down to the bottom of the page and wrote blessings and a little note to me, and then signed it. It was a really cool experience. And my wife and I just had the best time. We haven't been on a date in a little while with 2 kids, 6 and under. We don't always get a chance to do that. And we stayed out late. We got home late. We learned that we are not as young as we once were, because the whole next day at work we were both struggling. We were on the struggle bus. We went to this concert on a Wednesday night, not a Friday, not a Saturday, on a Wednesday night. And the concert itself was amazing. 1,200 people packed into this venue. We were like right up close to the front of the stage since we were there early. Best concert I've ever been to. The music was fantastic. The atmosphere was awesome. Had a great time. And anytime you have 1,000 people gathered together, singing songs that have lyrics that actually have meaning and that have value and that mean something and that aspire to a greater world and a greater existence, there's something powerful about that experience. That's what makes a concert something worth going to. And we just had a phenomenal time. It was a wonderful birthday present. I told wifey, if I get nothing else, I'm good. I'm good. I don't need anything else for my birthday. That concert was enough. It was a great time. Met some cool people there. Got to go on a date with my love. And got to see this journal entry come full circle for me hearing this song during a tough time, writing the lyrics down, hoping for a better day, and then meeting the artist that penned those lyrics and having him sign that journal was pretty neat to me as well. Okay, enough of that. We're going to get to some comments and corrections, but before we do, I've got to give you a real quick soccer update. A real quick soccer update, my babies. I done told you on the last episode your boy is an accidental soccer coach. I didn't mean to, but I became a 6 and 7 year old soccer coach. We had our first game last weekend, and we won 3-0. Yeah, undefeated. I might be the greatest soccer coach ever known to man. We don't know, but so far I'm undefeated. Was really proud of the kids, was really proud of my team. We only had 3 practices. The other 4 got rained out. Didn't even get the rules given to me until like the week of the game. Didn't get given any soccer balls or cones to practice with like the other teams. Had to have one of our practices out on the side by the woods in an empty field because all the other fields were taken up. And we still won 3-0. Yeah. This weekend we have a double header. I don't know why that's a thing at 6 and 7 year old soccer, but we're playing one game at 8:30 in the morning. Then we get about a 10-minute break and we playing again. So I've got to figure out some rotations and some ways to try and help us be competitive when we are already exhausted. But so far, we're undefeated, and that's cool. Our humble little show is being listened to across the globe, 28 countries and counting. It was 27. It's now 28, my babies. We added a listener this week in Azerbaijan, which is over there by Armenia, I think. Welcome to the family, Mr. Bijan. We are, of course, being listened to all over this great country of ours and internationally, too, with India holding strong at 40% of our listening audience, followed by the UK. We're still on fire in France for some reason. France, you are really starting to grow on me. And Australia's checking in. Welcome back, Australia. It's nice to see you listening to the show again. After Australia, it's Mexico, Canada, Germany, and Ireland, with Russia topping out our top 10 most listened to countries. We're currently averaging more listeners per episode than ever before. I've been able to say that for 3 or 4 episodes in a row, and it's been true every time. Slow and steady growth trumps all. Thank you. We're somehow up over 6,300 followers on Twitter. You can follow the show there at In The Shed 4. We could not do it without you. Keep helping us spread the word, and we will keep growing this thing together. Don't forget you can support the show by subscribing to our newsletter. It's only $4 a month, and it goes a long way in keeping that 50-foot extension cord plugged in. If you give me $4, I'll keep bringing you the news. To subscribe, email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com, or just send payment directly to our Cash App, which is the Wes Anderson, THEWESANDERSON, all lowercase, no spaces. It's not free to do this thing, my babies. I got to pay for the podcast to be hosted. I've got to upgrade equipment from time to time, and I'm paying for this beautiful shed that I'm sitting in right now as well. Almost have it paid off, but not quite. And every little bit helps. It's a beautiful shed. I'm trying to get the maker of the shed to sponsor the show since we record in it year-round. We're just exiting that season where I almost die of heat stroke. We're getting into that season where it feels pretty good to be in the shed, and then we're going to move on to where I almost die of exposure and cold. But hey, it's always dry inside the shed. It's very spacious. The sound quality is not half bad. It has withstood 2 hurricanes. And it's always a little bit cooler in here or a little bit warmer in here depending on the weather than you would expect it to be. I look forward to telling you the brand of this shed and who its maker is as soon as they sign on to be a sponsor. All right, we got a great show for you tonight. But first, let's get to some listener emails. Our first email comes from Jonathan from Miami, Florida, who writes, Wes, no show in over a week and very little activity on Twitter. Are you ending the show? No. The easy answer is no, Jonathan from Miami. I'm flattered by your concern that we may be ending the show. I say we, I'm the only one that puts on the show. I'm not ending the show, all internet speculation aside. I just took a week off. That's all. I just took a week off. Sometimes that happens. It's a weekly news show, but sometimes it might be 8, 10, 12 days in between episodes because I also have a full-time job, and I'm also a father, and I'm also a husband. And as much as I love you, Jonathan, and I don't know you, but I love you already. As much as I love you, you don't come first in my life. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. This podcast is not the most important thing in my life. I do love it. I do enjoy it. I like putting it on for you and with you and interacting with you, the listeners. But sometimes other things come first. So I just needed to take a week off, take care of some other things that were on my plate. And we're back this week. And we got a great show. And I'm glad that you care, Jonathan. And I'm thankful that you listen to the show, Jonathan. So don't worry, have no fear. In the Shed with Wes Anderson is here to stay, my friend. Our next email comes from Ty from Gainesville, Florida, back-to-back Florida men writing into the show, who says, Wes, I have to give you props. You ranked Kentucky at 10th overall entering the season, and I thought you were crazy. They took Anthony Richardson out of the game and beat my Gators in the Swamp and are now ranked 9th. Once again, you're ahead of the curve. I appreciate you giving me my flowers, Ty. Hey, I told you guys Kentucky has a good football team. I told you they would be good. I was a little bit nervous coming into that game because Kentucky was without their best running back and one of the better backs in the country in Chris Rodriguez Jr. And Florida had already played a big game. Kentucky had not yet. So I was a little nervous, but Kentucky did what I thought they would do, and they won the game in the Swamp. And look, we don't get everything right. When we get to the sports section today, we'll talk about some of our misses. We have some big misses when it comes to our predictions in college football. But we also do a better job, I think, of ranking teams going into the season than either the AP or the coaches poll. And that's because we take 2 full weeks to dive into every single Division I football team and to look at their roster and who they lost and who they brought in their recruiting class, to look at continuity in the coaching staff, to look at their schedule, to look at how many starters they have returning. And then we rank our teams 1 through 25. And the AP and the coaches poll don't do that. They just look at the names on the front of the jersey. They look at the conference. They look at how you did last year, and they throw the same teams out there with maybe 1 or 2 variations. But that's not what we do. We do our best to take a look at all teams, to consider who is the best, who will be the best on the field. We put a 1 through 25 together. We get some right, we get some wrong, but we tend to be ahead of the curve when it comes to our rankings. We did have Kentucky at 10th, and after week 4, we will update our rankings and we'll start putting them out week by week. But thank you for noticing, Ty. Anthony Richardson is a great player. He's going to be very good for Florida. You have a bright future ahead of you, but Kentucky was the better team on that particular Saturday. And finally, Kara from Portland writes, Wes, I found the smiley face killer story very interesting. That was the most background information I've ever heard on the theory. I always wondered where it came from. Hey, thank you, Kara. I appreciate you listening to the show and for those kind words. 3 nice emails this week. What are the odds? That has not happened very often on this show. Yeah, I think that theory is one that is very interesting, and it does make some valid points and have some solid rationale behind it. I'm not sure I buy into it 100%. But yeah, I enjoy diving into it as well, finding out where it came from, that it came from some actual investigators with a background in law enforcement. It's not just some people on the internet. It's not just some true crime author or podcaster. It's a group of actual law enforcement experts who have posited this theory and have some interesting evidence, although circumstantial. It's certainly worth taking a deeper look at, and I enjoy sharing that stuff with you. I appreciate the feedback. Thank you for listening to this show, Kara. That's all the listener emails this week. If you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. All right, let's switch to this. Let's get to the news in the world of politics, and let's hit the headlines. Trump scores 2 huge victories in fight for special master, writes the Federalist. Biden thinks Republican governors are being un-American after migrants are transported, reports the Independent Journal Review. Musk's friends warned him against buying Twitter, says Axios. From the New York Times, stocks slide in one of investors' worst weeks this year. And finally, the Russian military's ineptitude almost rivals our own. And that is according to The Nation. Our first story this week in the world of politics: Adnan Syed's murder conviction should be vacated, prosecutors say. Prosecutors in Baltimore are asking a judge to vacate Adnan Syed's conviction for the 1999 murder of Hae-Min Lee, a case that riveted America when it was turned into the hit first season of the podcast Serial. The state's attorney for Baltimore City said in a motion filed Wednesday in circuit court that a nearly year-long investigation conducted with the defense found new evidence, including information concerning the possible involvement of 2 alternative suspects. Prosecutors are requesting Mr. Syed be given a new trial. They said they weren't asserting that Mr. Syed is innocent. However, for all the reasons set forth below, the state no longer has confidence in the integrity of the conviction, said the Office of Baltimore State's Attorney, Marilyn Mosby, which is overseeing the reinvestigation. The office is recommending Mr. Syed be released on his own recognizance pending the continuing investigation. Mr. Syed, a Baltimore native, has been serving a life sentence after he was convicted in 2000 of strangling Mrs. Lee, his ex-girlfriend. He was 17 years old at the time of the crime and was charged as an adult. Mr. Syed has maintained that he is innocent, and both the 2014 Serial podcast and a later HBO documentary raised questions about his conviction. In 2018, a special appeals court ruled Mr. Syed deserved a new trial, but that decision was reversed almost a year later by Maryland's highest court. In March, attorneys for Mr. Syed approached Baltimore Sentence Review Unit about a new review of the case. Prosecutors said in the court filing Wednesday there is evidence suggesting there are 2 suspects who may have been involved either separately or together. The suspects were known at the time of the first investigation but were not properly ruled out, according to prosecutors. Identifying details of the 2 suspects, including their names, are being withheld because the investigation is ongoing, prosecutors say. References to the suspects were mentioned throughout the motion, but prosecutors did not delineate which suspect they were referring to. In their reinvestigation, prosecutors found a document in the state's trial file detailing one person's statement saying that one of the suspects had motive to kill Mrs. Lee and had threatened her in the presence of another person before. The suspect said he would make her disappear. He would kill her, according to the court filing. That information was never given to the defense, the filing said. Prosecutors are required by law to give defense counsel exculpatory evidence upon request. The reinvestigation also revealed that the grassy lot where Miss Lee's car was found in Baltimore was located behind a house that belonged to one suspect's relative. This information was not available to the defendant in his trial in 2000, and the state believes it would have provided persuasive support substantiating the defense that another person was responsible for the victim's death, prosecutors said in the filing. Without provocation or excuse, attacked a woman he did not know while she was in her vehicle. One suspect was accused and later convicted of rape and sexual assault. Both incidents occurred after Mr. Syed's trial, prosecutors said, but they added that they found the information relevant given the possible involvement of the suspects. The motion also calls into question the validity of cell phone records and data, which were an important piece of evidence for the prosecution in Mr. Syed's original trial, as well as a key witness's testimony. There's an abundance of issues that gives the state overwhelming cause for concern, prosecutors said as they requested a new hearing in the case. The reinvestigation of Mrs. Lee's murder is continuing, and prosecutors said they plan to ensure justice for the victim. But after reviewing the evidence and the new information about alternative suspects, it is our duty to ensure that justice is done, Mrs. Mosby said Wednesday. We believe that keeping him detained as we continue to investigate the case with everything that we know now, and when we do not have confidence in results of the first trial, would be unjust. So, the case of Adnan Syed. Yeah, I remember this. I remember the podcast Serial when it first came out and it covered this story. Everybody was listening to it. This was the first podcast that I ever actually got into and listened to several episodes. I think by the time I heard about it, every episode had been released and I binge listened in a couple of days. There are still some people that have listened to every episode of the podcast, that have watched the documentary, that have read about the case, that believe Mr. Syed is guilty. But certainly there are holes in the prosecution's case and in the way that the trial proceeded. And I think we can all agree on that, if nothing else. And the news coming out that there was possible exculpatory evidence that was not given over to the defense of Mr. Syed, that in and of itself is enough for a new trial. The fact that the young lady who tragically lost her life, that her car was found right behind a house that belonged to a family member of someone that could have possibly been a suspect, that should have been brought out at trial. That should be information that the defense had at their disposal, and they did not. It's hard when listening to Serial. They did such a great job with that season and with that podcast. It's hard when listening to that podcast to not believe that Adnan Syed is innocent of the crime. I'm not entirely sure. It's not something that I would bet the house on. It's not something that I'm 100% sure of. I don't know what happened. But there are certainly holes in the case, and if justice is really the outcome that we're all in favor of, everybody is entitled to receive a fair trial. And at least in this instance, Mr. Syed can make the argument, and a cogent one at that he did not receive a fair trial. So I have no problem. He's been serving life in prison. I have no problem with him being released on his own recognizance while they continue to investigate further, while they decide if he's going to have another trial, if the charges are going to be dropped, if the conviction is going to be vacated, if they can solve it and prove that in fact it was somebody else and not Mr. Syed. If I had to make a guess, and this is nothing but a guess, I am just spitballing, I lean 60-40 toward his innocence. I think that there's enough there to show that it was likely someone else, that there were others with motive. But like I say, I'm not sure. I'm not entirely convinced. I do give props to Mrs. Mosby and to the prosecutors in this case, because this is something that does not happen very often in our system. In our system, our justice system, that sometimes operates more like an injustice system. It doesn't happen very often where the defense says, hey, our person was prosecuted unfairly, we're asking that you reinvestigate, and usually the prosecutors say, no. Usually the Attorney General's office says, no. Usually they do whatever they have to in order to protect their conviction, even if there is ample evidence that it may be wrong. So what Mrs. Mosby and this group in Baltimore is doing, and actually calling for Mr. Syed's release as they reinvestigate, and saying that there are some things that are concerning, and that in the pursuit of justice they believe that he's entitled to a new trial, that's a rarity. And that's how it's supposed to work. It could have happened 10 years ago, but hey, better late than never for Mr. Syed. So props to Mrs. Mosby and her leadership and the group there. That is a good thing that they are doing. And whoever is guilty, I hope that investigators can prove their case. I hope that they can tie a bow on it for Mrs. Lee's family. I hope they can figure out who it was that took her life, that snuffed out her life unfairly and at no fault to her. This is a tragedy. This is a young kid that lost her life in a family that's forever changed and devastated. So I hope that justice is done and is served. But part of justice is that everybody deserves a fair trial. And I hope that that's what Mr. Syed gets as well. I thought this story was worth reporting on because it was such a big deal. It did impact media and podcasting in a huge way when that Serial Season 1 came out focused on this case, and this is the first update on it we've had in quite a while. What do you think? Was Adnan Syed guilty? Was he innocent? Who was guilty? Do we have any good suspects? Is justice being done by him possibly getting out of jail, or was justice done by him being found guilty and being put in prison for life? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Get at us on Twitter at intheshed4. I would love to hear from you on this case. Our second story in the world of politics, U.S. sent $1.3 billion in small business COVID aid abroad, raising new fraud concerns. As the U.S. government raced to shore up small businesses' finances at the height of the pandemic, it may have erroneously awarded more than $1.3 billion to foreign applicants, raising new suspicions that the program might have helped fund overseas crime syndicates. The top watchdog for the Small Business Administration, which reported its findings on Monday, said the spending posed a significant risk for potential fraud. In doing so, the watchdog underscored the agency's persistent, costly, and well-documented struggles to ensure its vast array of coronavirus aid benefited the cash-strapped firms that needed it the most. The trouble concerned the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or EIDL, an initiative dating to the Trump administration that provided grants and other financial support to struggling small companies. More than 27.8 million applicants ultimately sought funds from the SBA, overwhelming an agency that had been tasked to oversee a vast array of emergency spending that dwarfed its annual budget. Congress required the SBA to disperse its EIDL aid only to those businesses affected by the pandemic and located in the United States or its territories. But a crush of applicants from foreign sources still flooded the agency over the life of its program, and the SBA repeatedly appeared to fund them anyway. In total, the SBA made 41,638 awards totaling $1.3 billion to applicants that pursued that aid using computers believed to be located abroad, according to the agency's Inspector General. The watchdog said that some of the applicants came from what were deemed high-risk countries, which should have been blocked from filing applicants outright. More than $14 million in EIDL aid went to applicants in these unnamed countries, the investigation found. In many cases, the new report attributed the potential theft to poor oversight and faulty technology. That included a system for receiving and vetting applications designed and managed by an unnamed outside contractor that failed to thwart potentially problematic foreign applicants as intended, according to the Inspector General. Adding to the trouble, the watchdog specifically said the money may have been stolen by international criminal organizations, noting investigations are underway to find some of these malicious actors. Christina Carr, a spokeswoman for SBA, said in a statement Monday the issue stemmed from a technical decision made under the Trump administration that since has been rectified. She added that the agency is committed to ensuring that effective fraud controls are in place for future programs. In its official reply to the Inspector General included as part of the report, the SBA also said that $1.3 billion in questionable funds represented less than 0.04% of the total $342 billion approved for EIDL. SBA leaders also pointed to the fact that they had stopped millions of attempts from foreign sources to access its online application portal. Otherwise, agency officials said they would review the awards for potential abuse. The OIG declined to identify the contractor that helped the SBA create its systems. The watchdog cautioned in its report that not every foreign application may be fraudulent, since it is possible for Americans who reside abroad or businesses with certain ownership stakes in U.S. firms to qualify as long as they meet other criteria. The findings nonetheless add to the myriad headaches faced by the SBA, which has been tasked with managing more than $1 trillion in aid since the start of the pandemic. The agency's work over the past 2 years did contribute to a swift recovery for an economy that had been in freefall, keeping countless businesses from shuttering for good. But it's also carried significant risks for waste, fraud, and abuse, the consequences of which have been laid bare in a year-long investigation by the Washington Post. Much of the suspected SBA theft targeted the Paycheck Protection Program, which provided forgivable loans to businesses. Both the PPP and the EIDL date to the Trump administration. With EIDL, for example, congressional investigators found this summer that as many as 1.6 million, or 41% of the 3.9 million loan applicants received under the program may have been approved with no actual review by an SBA employee. Earlier, the agency's Inspector General found the SBA had awarded EIDL funds to criminals that applied using stolen identities, the Post has reported. And the SBA has faced criticism over the way it doled out aid for other initiatives as well, including a program for shuttered concert halls and other performance venues. Some of those funds ended up going to firms linked to Live Nation Entertainment, an industry giant that some members of Congress said did not need to benefit from the law. So, we now know that during a pandemic, in which roughly 200,000 small businesses across our country closed their doors for good, and in which all over our country, small business owners were not allowed by law to operate their businesses that they count on to pay their bills and to feed their families. A time in which some studies and experts have suggested closed up to 1/3 of American small businesses, either for a portion of time or altogether forever. During that time, the Small Business Administration accidentally and fraudulently gave out $1.3 billion in funding to foreign businesses or actors, some of which are criminal, who shouldn't have even been allowed to apply in the first place. Wow. Talk about government mismanagement of funds. Talk about governmental ineptitude. Talk about spending. Talk about waste. You cannot be too hyperbolic when talking about the failure of our government in this instance. And I don't understand why this report is not on every major news channel. I don't care if it's CNN. I don't care if it's MSNBC. I don't care if it's Fox News. This is a big deal, and this should be reported on by all of them. And where do I find it? I find it on page 5 or page 6, reported in a couple of newspapers, but buried. Buried. 1.3 billion of our tax dollars just given away to foreign businesses while we're out here in a pandemic struggling to make it, small businesses closing. And some of the things that were funded were criminal organizations. Out here funding foreign criminal organizations. Didn't we just talk on the last show about the former president of Honduras being extradited and charged with crimes for doing that while in office? Our government and the SBA out here just doing it on accident. It's just accidental. Our bad. We're not going to see that money. We're not going to be refunded. There aren't going to be any consequences for their misdeeds, for their misappropriation, for their actions. Go to your job. See what happens if you can't account for $130, let alone $1.3 billion. You'll be fired. You'll be out of work. But these people just throw up their hands and say, well, we didn't mean it. Our bad. And they move on with their life. And look, I'm not trying to vilify the SBA. I'm not trying to vilify the government. I'm not even saying that we shouldn't have been giving money to small business owners. Some of these loans, these PPP and these other fundings helped keep people afloat. But I am highlighting the ineptitude and the lack of oversight and the lack of accountability because it runs rampant in our government. I'm not talking about a Trump administration or a Biden administration. I'm not talking about Democrats or Republicans. I'm talking about all of it. I'm talking about politics. And if you see the list of these PPP loans and who received them, some of these giant corporations, some of these millionaire and billionaires, some of these politicians and athletes, these people that really didn't need to receive a dime, and somehow they were first in line, and somehow they received millions of dollars when 200,000 small businesses were going belly up. Our government always seems to have money to bail out the billionaires, to bail out the auto industry, to bail out the airlines, to bail out all the bankers and Wall Street, and when they speculate and when they do things that are ghastly, when they wind up mismanaging funds because of their own greed and arrogance. There's always money to bail out those folks. But those of us that work a 9 to 5, those of us that are entrepreneurs, those of us who struggle to pay our bills week in and week out, you're on your own, my babies. You're not a part of the club. And I can't express that strongly enough to you, and I hope that you realize, whether you're team left or team right, R or D, elephant or donkey, hear me on this. They are all a part of a club that we are not. And they act in the best interest of their club and not of us. Does that mean that all politicians are bad people, that every government aid should be rendered void? Of course not. Of course not. There are some things that Democrats get right that Republicans don't, and vice versa. There's good people and bad people on both sides of the aisle, but we're not in the club. And we did a terrible job of supporting our small business owners during the pandemic. Other countries didn't do what we did. Other countries either allowed you to operate your business so that you could make a living, or if they required you to be at home, they asked you to really be at home, to shut everything down, and they would float you the whole time. As long as they're asking you to stay home, they would float you. What did we do? We demanded that you close your doors. By law, you're not allowed to operate, and we're going to pay you like a third of what you would have had during that time. We're going to give you a fraction of what you might have made, and just, well, good luck to you. Hope your business survives. Hope you pay your bills. Hope that your staff doesn't all walk away. We mismanaged it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it was intentional. I'm not saying that it's Republicans' fault, it's Democrats' fault. It was a pandemic. It was a situation that we haven't experienced in several generations. But we mismanaged it. And there was a whole lot of people during that mismanagement that seemed to benefit. And it wasn't you and it wasn't me. The rich get richer. Government wastes money. Criminal organizations prosper and benefit and reap the reward. Should be headline news. And it happens all the time. And if you don't know, now you know. Our next story in the world of politics: New York City considers banning sale of guinea pigs as the popular pandemic pets overwhelm shelters. That's right. We're talking guinea pigs overwhelming pet shelters. Because on In the Shed with Wes Anderson, we bring you the news that you won't find anywhere else. We talking some G-pigs. We talking some hamsters. They're not the same thing. Have guinea pigs become too popular for their own good? That's a question worth asking in light of the fact animal shelters have been inundated with the four-legged pets, according to a report in the city website. That is a question worth asking. Have guinea pigs become too popular for their own good? Follow us on Twitter at InTheShed4, and when this episode of the show comes out, episode 51, we will ask this question on Twitter, and we will get to the bottom of this. Have guinea pigs become too popular for their own good? You will tell me. We will find out together. The story notes that shelters in New York City have already received 600 guinea pigs to date this year. By contrast, less than half that number were received in 2019 during the same time frame. The city is considering legislation that would ban pet stores from selling the rodents, clearly a way to curb shelters from having to deal with the pig population problem. Voters for Animal Rights, a lobbying group, has supported the legislation. This surge of homeless guinea The surge of homeless guinea pigs is the next line in this article, and I couldn't say it. I couldn't say it without bursting into laughter because it is such a silly combination of words. But alas, it's Friday morning, it's early. I'm in the shed in Alabama, and here we are. This surge of homeless guinea pigs is not sustainable for the animal rescue community, the group says on its website. The reason for the surge in guinea pig popularity and abandonment? It all has to do with the pandemic. Naturally. Of course it does, because everything is, you just blame anything on the pandemic. My grades are bad, the pandemic. I'm lonely, the pandemic. I don't have a job, the pandemic. Guinea pigs have overrun the city of New York. Pandemic? Yeah, let's go with that. As people were stuck at home, they sought companionship in the form of pets. Dog adoptions and sales took off during the pandemic, for example. But guinea pigs proved especially popular because of their relatively low cost. They are generally priced under $50 at pet stores, though cages and bedding will add to the tab. You ain't got to buy your G-pig a bed. Put you some pine straw. Let them make their own bed. The animals. Don't come for me, Peter. And the fact that they can require less maintenance than a dog. But they still require some degree of care and feeding, and that must have proved a bit too much for some guinea pig owners, particularly as life has gotten back to normal in recent months and people have started returning to the office. Katie Hansen, a spokesperson for the Animal Care Centers of New York City, a nonprofit organization dedicated to animal rescue, noted earlier in 2022 that most of the guinea pigs her organization has received are no more than a year and a half old, aligning with the timeline for the purchase of pandemic pets. Adding to the complications, guinea pigs are often purchased in pairs, and it's about impossible to know the sex of the animal without a sonogram, according to the city story. As a result, guinea pig owners often unwittingly pair a male and a female and suddenly find themselves with the whole family. In turn, that can result in owners wanting to find a place for those unexpected piglets. The issue is hardly confined to New York City. Animal shelters everywhere from California to Georgia are also seeing a boom in pig surrenders, according to another report. So guinea pigs are just running rampant, and they've got to be stopped. Before they get into the sewer and gain some superpowers, learn some karate from a rat, and I had no idea that guinea pigs were such a problem. I didn't know that they were such a popular pandemic pet, and I didn't know that people surrendered them to shelters on a regular basis. I've heard of people abandoning their dogs, or their cats, or kittens, or puppies, or taking them to the shelter, but the thought has never crossed my mind of people taking a 3-pound guinea pig to an animal shelter and saying, I cannot care for this very small rodent. Please take it off my hands. That thought has never crossed my mind. 600 guinea pigs surrendered already this year in New York City alone. 600 guinea pigs. And my thing is, they said that guinea pigs usually sell for about $50. That's $30,000 worth of guinea pigs surrendered. I might be adopting some guinea pigs if I live in New York City. Like, hey, give me a couple of them G-pigs. I might get into the G-pig game. I might be slanging G-pigs. Hey, they $50 at the store. I'll sell them to you for $35. Buy two, you get them for $25 each. I got a sale on some G-pigs. You want a little one? Give me a couple weeks. They about to have babies. People just out here getting rid of their pets, man. I don't do that. All my pets are rescues. I think I've said that on the show. And I always give people that look like me, white people, a hard time for their love of their pets and the way that they treat them better than their kids sometimes. But all my pets are rescues. I love animals. I've rescued 3 cats, a dog. I guess our fish aren't really rescues, but I don't know how you rescue a fish. They in the water. They fine. Unless you take them up off a hook or something, off of a dinner plate, revive them. I digress. All my pets are rescues. And the way it works in my household is if you take on a pet, that pet becomes a member of your family. Not as important as your children, okay? Hear me on that. Children are more important than pets. Human life is of more value. But it doesn't mean that your animals don't have value and aren't a part of the family and shouldn't be treated well. So in this household, if we adopt a pet, that pet is a member of our family until the day that they die. No matter what. If they get sick, we take them to the doctor. If they misbehave or are a difficult pet to have, we train them. We figure out what the issue is. We get to the root of the problem, and we try to address it the best way that we can. We bear with them. We understand that they are beings with value that have had a hard life a lot of times, and they've learned some bad habits, and they need to be supported and taken care of, okay? I have a dog. I wanted to get a dog for my birthday 3 years ago. And I rescued a dog that had already been given the name Susanna. Weird name for a dog. I shortened it to Susie. Susie is a big dummy. She's actually very smart. And she is an Australian Shepherd and Husky mix. She's very good with our children, is very good with our cats, has just a wonderful demeanor, is a very kind and sweet and gentle dog, okay? But when I got Susie, What I did not know at the time until after I adopted her is that she had been adopted and returned 5 or 6 times already. Yeah. Susie is a runner. Susie needs exercise. Susie needs a lot of space. And I adopted her thinking that she was going to be an outside dog. I have a fenced-in backyard. I bought her the world's best dog house. I put her in there with some toys, was going to come get her out of the fence every day, take her for walks, bring her in the house, but she was going to stay in the backyard. That didn't work. This dog is the Houdini of dogs, okay? It does not matter what you do. We tried the little shock collar, not in a mean way, but the one that just buzzes and makes loud noises. We tried an underground fence. We tried cement blocks. We filled in hole after hole. This dog escapes the fence no matter what, okay? I even put the dog on one of them spiral pigtail looking tether things that goes down into the ground, and then you put a long lead on it. Inside of a fenced-in backyard, mind you. The dog dug up the spiral deal, dug a hole, went out of the fence, and drug the entire apparatus behind her. And she has a good life here. She loves our family. But she cannot be an outside dog because she's a runner. And she digs holes and she gets out of the yard. She tears up your yard. She gets out of the fence. She takes off running. She thinks it's a game. She will not come back to you. You have to catch her, and she is fast as lightning. I understand why people brought her back. They brought her back because it's difficult. It's difficult to remedy. Because it's an inconvenience. But instead of bringing her back, I realized that maybe there was something else going on here. And I got to the bottom of the issue for my particular dog. She has separation anxiety. She wants to be where her people are. When you leave because of whatever she's been through in these other homes, she has a very hard time with it. So I brought her inside, and I made the dog that was supposed to be an outside dog an inside dog. I gave her a routine. I let her sleep on the floor at the edge of the bed. I take her on walks for exercise, and she has been a phenomenal pet and member of our family ever since. It took a solid 1.5 years to work with this animal, to understand what was going on and to figure out a solution. And I shared that story just to say that if you have a pet, if you adopt a pet and something goes wrong, something is difficult, something is hard, something is inconvenient, work with your pet. Try to figure out a solution. Hang in there. Give them the time that they deserve, the opportunity to learn how to be a part of your home and your family. Provide them with structure. Provide them with kindness. Take good care of them. Don't just take them and abandon them or drop them off at the shelter. Again, this is a PSA. Okay. I can't stand when people adopt a pet and then the first time something goes wrong, they drop it back off at the shelter. So if you're out here with a G-Pig and you're struggling, don't be like those other 600 people that adopt a G-Pig and take it a year later to a shelter to surrender your rights to your rodent. Hang in there with your G-Pig. Cut your G-Pig some slack. And if you are tired of your G-Pig, give it to me, and I'll be in the G-Pig game. I'll be slanging guineas. How many do you want? $35 a piece. I got you. I got you. Our last story in the world of politics this week. Former FBI and CIA agents are sharing what they can reveal without killing us. And OMG. A little while ago, Reddit user Mr. Squirrel, that's their name, Mr._Squirrel, posed the question, FBI, CIA agents of Reddit, what's something you can tell us without killing us? And there were so many fascinating answers. Here are some of the top voted responses. Obviously, we can't confirm all of these stories, but these people are supposedly speaking from their own experience as alleged government employees. My dad worked for the government, and he told me that anytime he had a meaningful interaction with someone who wasn't American, i.e. going over to my friend's house for Lunar New Year or going on vacation to Canada, he had to report it all, and if he saw anything suspicious. So if you're friends with anybody who has a background that's not American, you just got to be out here reporting on everything they do and what you know about them. Interesting. My girlfriend worked for the National Reconnaissance Office after college. I have no idea what that is. At the time, they were responsible for analyzing the nation's spy satellite photos. She told me there's a special garbage chute for classified materials. It's in the hallway. When you're new, as a hazing ritual, they tell you have to shout your badge number down the chute before throwing in any materials, which I find to be hilarious. That's a pretty harmless prank. I didn't think that at the National Reconnaissance Office they would be doing office shenanigans. Didn't see that as something that they would be engaging in, office hijinks. But it seems like a pretty harmless and pretty fun prank that you got some noobs over here putting some trash down the chute talking about badge 347.5A, 347.5A, for like what, 2 or 3 weeks before they figure it out. I like that. That's like in high school, we used to sell the freshmen passes to ride the elevator. Oh, you got your elevator pass? Oh, you don't have one? It's only $2 here. Give me $2. I'll get you one. And then we just, we got snack money or something. My dad worked for GCHQ in the UK in the 80s doing voice recognition. He can't say anything more for another decade, but the way they can recognize you by Siri Google today was being used in the 80s, just a bit slower. And I believe that one. I really do. I believe that one because any technology that we have available at our fingertips has been known by the government and by intelligence agencies and by the military-industrial complex first. Like, they had all of this stuff first. They knew about it first. So if it's something that you can do, hey, they've already been doing it for a while. So I believe that one. And I think in another decade or two, there will be more examples that we can point to, like, hey, we thought this was new technology. Actually, they had it 20 years ago. So, yeah, very interesting. And also, the 80s is not 20 years ago. The 80s is 40 years ago. Doesn't seem possible, but I digress. Not an FBI or CIA officer, but my sister is a district attorney. And over the years, she's prosecuted a number of animal cruelty cases. This led to her having an ongoing partnership with the FBI for the last several years. It turns out the FBI started tracking animal abuse cases about 10 to 15 years ago due to the incredibly high correlation between abusing animals when you're young and becoming a serial violent offender as an adult. Again, I believe that one. I have no problem believing that this is true. Some of these I was kind of questionable about because they came from Reddit, and anybody can say anything on the front page of the internet. Doesn't make it true necessarily. But this one I believe. This one I find credible because we have all heard that and seen that reported, that abusing animals while a child, that there is a correlation between that and someone who is violent later in life. Correlation does not equal causation. We know that. But it's certainly interesting, and I could see the FBI tracking such cases for that very purpose. I have a relative that retired from NSA a few years ago. She's talked about a few things. One, you will see things that entirely change your view of the world. People go in there all the time with lofty goals of changing things, and within months, those goals are mostly gone. Still, if you want to change things, you work for the agency. If you just want to make money, you work for a contractor. No one cares what contractors have to say. 2, most people who stay long enough will do a tour and counter terrorism. Many people transfer out after a few months, and the average stay is 2 years because of the visuals. Those who stick around for a long time often change for the worse, and many struggle with mental illness, become alcoholics, get divorced, and generally lead miserable lives with their work their only reason for continuing. That's depressing on both counts. But again, believable. And I think that comparison here with the NSA, I think that's exactly what happens to so many people who are elected president, right? They make all these lofty promises. They talk about making changes. They talk about hope. They talk about our country being different. And then they get in and they do a lot of the same things, contribute to a lot of the same illnesses and practices that exist within the fabric of our government, just like every president before them. I think there's certain things that you just have to do that you don't know until you get into the job. You're sat down and told, like, hey, you can't do that. You have to do this. This is the way this works. And you just don't have much of a choice. I do believe people working jobs like that are probably predisposed to mental illness and addiction and alcoholism and divorce and things like that because of the high level of stress. That completely makes sense to me. My spouse is an FBI agent. One of the things they had to do at the FBI Academy was go to the Holocaust Memorial Museum in D.C. The lesson was what can happen if you blindly follow orders without ever questioning the morality or intent behind them. I found that pretty compelling, and I was glad to hear that it's a part of their training. Yeah, that is a worthwhile part of training, to remember that. Always question the morality and the intent behind any order given, in any job, in any relationship. Trust but verify. Examine everything. I've been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. An incredibly moving experience. You ever get the opportunity, you should go there. Tremendously moving experience about one of the world and one of history's great tragedies. Yeah. I applied to be an accountant at the FBI out of college. On the first or second page of the application, it asks if you've ever done any illegal drug. Not wanting to lie, I said yes, and it immediately ended the application process. It's shocking to me that there are so many FBI agents and absolutely none of them have ever smoked weed. Yeah, probably none of them are honest on the application. I would bank on that. You just did not have the societal and social awareness to lie. And props to you for being honest. Honesty is the best policy in most cases, unless your wife asks you how she looks in an outfit where she looks terrible. Don't tell her. Your wife should always be beautiful in your eyes. Beauty comes from the soul. And she can be beautiful even if the dress isn't flattering. So always, but usually honesty is the best policy. And I commend you for your honesty, but those people just weren't honest is all. I was an analyst, not an agent or an officer. About 85% of all classified material is classified because of how it was collected, not because it is juicy or useful. And again, I completely buy that. That makes a lot of sense to me. Who collected it and how and where it came from, that's what they're trying to protect in a lot of these instances, not actually what was collected. That makes sense. If you apply for a job in the UK at GCHQ, MI5, MI6, etc., they will talk to every member of your close family. If any minor red flag comes up, you might not get the job. Also, if you're Chinese, Russian, North Korean, etc., I think it extends to a grandparent or great-grandparent being from that country. You may not even be able to apply. Very interesting. Yeah, I have a family member that applied for a job. Not with intelligence, not with the military, a civilian job, but something that needed a certain level of military clearance. And this relative called us up and said, hey, just so you know, you're probably going to get a call and someone's going to ask questions about me. And if that happens, it's for a job. Answer them honestly. Don't ask them who they are or why they're calling. And everything will be okay. And that person is in that job. And I never received a call. But I believe it. I've had a security clearance so I can weigh in a little. 2 things. Firstly, most secret stuff happens right in front of people's faces under the guise of being normal everyday stuff. Secondly, properly secret programs and operations are never named in any way that indicates what they're actually about. They're generally just 2 words chosen at random and that would rarely come up in normal conversation. Stuff like cracked gorilla, which I just made up off the top of my head. Again, I find that to be a distinct possibility and very likely scenario, that a lot of the secret things that happen, quote unquote, actually happen out in broad daylight right in front of us and appear to be just normal everyday things. People who are undercover, people who are posing as civilians, front businesses, all the stuff that you see in movies, that stuff really happens. That stuff is legitimately happening all around us, every neck of the woods, all walks of life, all the time. I'm not saying you come in contact with FBI or CIA agents every single day. I'm not saying the flower shop on the corner is a front for covert operations. I'm just saying that stuff happens. And yes, of course, they're not going to name things in a way that give away what it does. Operation, we think a terrorist works at the hospital. It's not going to be called that, okay? It's going to be something entirely different that throws you off the scent or that, if discovered, doesn't give any indication of what they're actually up to. So I thought that report was noteworthy because it had a lot of things that, while not verified, seemed to be very likely true and allegedly come from people with experience in intelligence. We've covered the intelligence agencies on this show thoroughly before. We've been critical when need be. And I thought it would be cool to take another look, to take a look at things from a different standpoint, from a different viewpoint, to have fun with it, to look at what these FBI and CIA agencies and agencies like that, what are some of their operative strategies? What regulations and rules and expectations do they have of employees from the perspective of a potential employee, allegedly? And so I thought that was worthwhile and noteworthy and worth sharing with you, our listeners, something that you probably won't hear or see unless you happen to be on the front page of the internet. And most of it I find to be very credible stuff. What's something that you've heard about our intelligence agencies? What intel do you have? Do you have anyone in your family or friend group that works for one of these agencies, and what have they shared with you? I would love to hear from you, our listeners. Share with us by emailing the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com or get at us on Twitter at intheshed4. I've told you before, my grandma Edna, rest in peace, Grandma Edna, she worked for the FBI. Straight out of high school. They came to her small backwoods town in Tennessee, and a lot of kids took a test. She scored very high on it. She graduated high school, got on a bus, and went to D.C. and worked for the FBI. And then she came to Huntsville, Alabama, and worked for NASA. And I never heard a word from her about her time at the FBI other than she would say, I just did some secretarial work. And I'm like, but did you? But did you? That's all the news in the world for politics this week. Let's switch to this, the news in the world of sports, and let's hit the headlines. Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert sustains rib injury and loss. Suns minority owner calls on Sarver to resign. Michael Jordan's Last Dance jersey sells for $10 million. Cowboys backup quarterback Cooper Rush says that his team is ready to roll despite Dak Prescott's injury. Patriots QB Mac Jones sits out practice with illness. UConn settles with former men's basketball coach Kevin Ollie for $3.9 million in wrongful termination suit. Woman is arrested outside the home of Kentucky basketball coach John Calipari. The Miami Hurricanes will be without top wide receiver against Texas A&M this weekend. And finally, Tennessee gives football coach Josh Heupel a $1 million raise along with a contract extension. All right, let's talk some college football. The AP Top 10 currently looks like this. Number 1, the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 2, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Third-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. At number 4, the Michigan Wolverines. The Clemson Tigers are at 5th. 6th overall is the Oklahoma Sooners. 7th, the USC Trojans. 8th, the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Number 9, the Kentucky Wildcats. And rounding out the top 10 is the Arkansas Razorbacks. Just as a quick reminder, our preseason In the Shed with Wes Anderson top 10 poll looked like this. Alabama, Georgia at 2, Ohio State 3rd, Baylor 4th, NC State 5th, Oklahoma State 6th, Houston 7th, Clemson 8th, Notre Dame 9th, and Kentucky at 10th. And we've already gotten a lot right so far in this football season. We had Ohio State ranked 3rd overall to begin the year. They happen to be 3rd overall 2 weeks into the season. We had both BYU and Tennessee ranked and ranked higher than did the AP or the coaches poll. We had Mississippi State as a top 25 team, and I think that prediction is looking better thus far 2 weeks into the season. We told you that Cincinnati and Arkansas would be a one-possession game late in the fourth quarter, that Arkansas would win. We gave you Florida over Utah. We gave you Kentucky over Florida. We've gotten a lot right. We've gotten a lot right. Our record overall is pretty good. We also had Houston ranked 7th overall in the country. So we're not batting 1,000, okay? We hit an occasional double. We hit a triple, a solo home run. We're doing pretty well. But we also had the Houston Cougars ranked 7th in the country. I believed that they were going to go undefeated. They don't have Central Florida on their regular season schedule. They don't have Cincinnati on their regular season schedule. I thought that they would possibly, if they could get by UTSA in the first game, and they could beat a tough Eastern Carolina team that they might go 12-0 in the regular season. And instead they lost their second game of the year in overtime to Texas Tech by like 4 points and ruined my prediction. Now, if the Cougars end up going 11-1 in the regular season, we'll still look pretty good, but as of right now, that's one prediction that did not pan out for us. And I'm sure there will be several more as we continue along with the college football season. Let's take you around the SEC and look at what's happening there. In the SEC West, there are 3 teams that are looking really good right now. That's Alabama, Arkansas, and Mississippi State. Alabama coming off a disappointing game for sure against Texas on the road. Look, I did not have Texas being competitive in that game. As one of my picks against the spread, I picked Alabama to cover on a 20.5 point spread. I thought this game would be a blowout. I did not think that Texas's defensive line would work the offensive line of Alabama like that. I thought that Bryce Young would be a lot sharper. I expected Alabama to be able to run the football better. And I didn't think that Texas would be able to move the ball the way that they did. I didn't think that their receivers would break through coverage so often and be wide open like they were against an Alabama team. The truth is, Alabama did not look good. And even more surprising, they looked undisciplined. How many times after Nick Saban's first season at Alabama have you seen them play a game where they just looked undisciplined? I think they had like 14 penalties in the game. They got called for multiple pass interferences. They were offsides. They did all kinds of things that are uncharacteristic of a Nick Saban football team. And they probably got away with an intentional grounding and or safety in the end zone. They would have been monumental. But even so, they won the game. Texas, who was playing without Quinn Ewers, who went down in the first quarter with an injury, he was playing very well before that. Texas played phenomenally. Their game plan was good. They were fired up. They executed. They were a tough, hard-nosed, physical football team, which you have not been able to say about the Longhorns in a while. And for large portions of the game, they outplayed Alabama. But when the kicker for Texas, whose last name happened to be Auburn, which was hilarious, when he kicked the go-ahead field goal with like a minute and 34 seconds left, I think all of us who are SEC football fans just knew instinctually that was too much time. I never really expected Texas to win the game at any point, even when they took a lead with a minute and a half left. Alabama had 2 timeouts, a minute and 34 seconds, the better players, and Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Bryce Young. And the only time of the game that Bryce Young and the offense executed well and looked poised was on that final drive. And even then, Texas almost won the game. They almost, on a third down, almost sacked Bryce Young, which may have taken them out of field goal range, but he ducked the defender. He pulled a Houdini. He took off. He got the first down. Alabama wins the game. 1 point. By 1 point. But they win the game. Even despite that loss, Alabama is clearly one of the top 5 teams in the country. Most likely one of the best 2. They've got more talent than anybody outside of possibly Georgia. They have the best coach in the game. This is probably going to be a good thing for Alabama in the long run. They're going to know that their offensive line is going to have to improve. They're going to know that their secondary is going to have to play a little less handsy. They're going to know that they're going to get everyone's best shot and that they can't just walk out there and be Alabama and get a win. Nick Saban will use this to their advantage. They still look like a very good football team. How about the Arkansas Razorbacks? How about what Sam Pittman continues to do in Fayetteville? This guy's incredible. I'm sold. I'm sold on Sam Pittman. My question for Arkansas was, could they build on the momentum of being unexpectedly good last year? They blew everyone away last year being as good as they were. And so far, 2 games in, small sample size, but they look better. They look even better. Their defense looks to be improved. They're such a physical football team. KJ Jefferson is running the ball and throwing the ball down the field with accuracy. They look disciplined. They look tough. They look hard-nosed. They look like the 3rd best team in the SEC right now. They are as advertised. And the other team that looks good in the SEC West is the Mississippi State Bulldogs, a team that we had ranked 20th overall in our preseason poll. It's year 3 under head coach Mike Leach. And he has an experienced and talented quarterback in Will Rogers and a deep defense. And once you reach year 3 under Mike Leach, if you also have an experienced quarterback and a solid defense, it's a formula for a team that can really surprise some people. And I think on a national scale, people don't understand the roster that Mississippi State has put together, the level of talent that they have, the flexibility that they have, the way that they fit the schemes that they are put in on defense, and now even on offense. And they're a good football team. So in the West, Alabama, Arkansas, and Mississippi State look very good, while Ole Miss, Auburn, and Texas A&M are a complete mystery through 2 games. They're a complete mystery. Granted, Ole Miss and Auburn are 2-0 mysteries, whereas Texas A&M just lost to Appalachian State and is 1-1 and has a huge game with Miami this weekend. But all 3 are mysteries. We don't really know what's going on with Ole Miss at the quarterback position yet. They have 2 options. We don't know how good of an option they are. We need more information. We need to see Ole Miss play a real opponent. And we don't know how good their defense can be. We don't know what their defensive ceiling is. We know that they have playmakers. We know that Lane Kiffin can put together a winning team. They won double-digit games last year. But so far, they're still a mystery. We need more information. How are they going to look when they get to the heart of their SEC schedule? When they're playing teams with just as much or more talent than them? Do they have a quarterback that will produce in those situations? Do they have a defense that can get off the field on 3rd downs? And my Auburn Tigers, I don't know what to say about my Auburn Tigers. Their secondary has been surprisingly disappointing. I thought that they had enough returning talent there to be a very good secondary, and maybe they will prove to be, but so far in 2 games against very inferior opponents, they look average. They look average. Their defensive 7 looks very good. Their front 7, their defensive line is deep and talented and can put pressure on any quarterback that they play this year. Their linebackers look to be solid. The secondary could turn out to be a problem if they don't tighten up. And even though I think Auburn has a defense that will rank somewhere in the top half of SEC defenses, they have not forced a turnover yet against San Jose State and Mercer. That's going to have to change quick because on offense, they are giving the ball away more than any other team in the country through the air except for one. We're 2 games in. Auburn has a matchup at home against Penn State, and we don't even know if they have a legitimate SEC-level quarterback on their roster right now. They have Robbie Ashford that can run the ball. He is one of the fastest players on the field no matter who they're playing. He's electric. He's got to be on the field. But if he's on the field and every time he's there, the other team just knows, hey, we can put a couple spies on him, we can load the box, he's just going to run. That's probably not a recipe for success right there. And so far, it doesn't seem like TJ Finley being your quarterback is much a recipe for success either. And I know Auburn fans are behind Coach Harsin for the most part after what happened to him in the offseason, and we're hoping for good things. And TJ Finley is the most experienced quarterback that we have, along with Zach Calzada, who has slid to 3rd-string quarterback. But none of his experience so far has been very good. He wasn't very good at LSU. He wasn't very good last year, and so far he's not very good this year against very inferior competition. Auburn's offensive line doesn't look to be heads and tails better than they were last year, and that's a problem. When you have a running back room that includes Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter and the talented freshman Damari Alston, and you're not getting much push off the ball, they're having to dodge a guy, break a tackle in the backfield 3 out of every 4 runs, that's not looking good. And then Texas A&M. Texas A&M is certainly still a mystery. Will Jimbo Fisher turn to Max Johnson, the quarterback transfer from LSU, if Haynes King struggles in the beginning of the Miami game? You would think he would have to. Texas A&M's offense looks to be outdated. They're running the same stuff that Jimbo Fisher teams ran 6-8 years ago. And the game has evolved. And his coaching has not. I'm sorry, I just don't think that Jimbo Fisher is an elite coach in college football. Take a look at what he's accomplished as head coach when he hasn't had an all-time quarterback on his roster or an exceedingly good college football quarterback. Now, you can say quarterback play is so important. Look at what any team does, There's validity to that. But I'm just saying, The man had the best recruiting class in history. So much money has been poured into that program. He stacked talent for years, and it's looking like he's going to have to do a good job to get to 8-4. Maybe they turn things around, but right now, Ole Miss, Auburn, and Texas A&M are all mysteries, and at least Ole Miss and Auburn are 2-0. And then there's the LSU Tigers. And somebody in this shed predicted that they would go 5-7 and got laughed at and got mocked and got told about the talent that exists for an LSU team and got told about Jaden Daniels and got told about how Brian Kelly is a top 10, possibly top 5 head coach and blah, 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 blah. Lost to FSU just like I told you they would. Just like I told you they would. They lost to FSU in the opener. They had every chance to win that ball game. They couldn't get it done. It was not Jaden Daniels' fault. The kid was the only thing going for LSU on that night, except for like their punter. And I do think that Brian Kelly is an excellent head coach, and I do think that he will get things turned around. But their defense looked really bad and undisciplined. And that was the problem for them last year. And I think that it's going to take more than a year to get that figured out. I don't think Brian Kelly can show up in the offseason and get everything fixed right away. He's going to have to overhaul culture and create a culture of discipline and hard work to go along with the incredible talent that LSU always has. And I think he will. And he may do it quicker than I think. Maybe LSU winds up being in the top half of the SEC West, but after just a game or two, it looks more like they're headed towards where I predicted they would be. Meanwhile, in the SEC East, Georgia is incredibly good again. Incredibly talented again. I tried to tell you, everyone talking about how their defense would take large steps back because they had so many people drafted. Not happening. Kirby Smart has that thing rolling in Athens. They have so much talent and depth at every position. And they may not have an all-time top 5, top 10 defense in college football like they did last year, but they are going to be darn good and fast and deep and able to make teams look like what Oregon looked like a couple Saturdays ago. They're going to do that to most teams that they play. They're that good. Also in the East, 2 other teams are looking pretty good so far, and that's Kentucky Wildcats and the Tennessee Volunteers. I told you that Mark Stoops was a very underrated coach. 2 out of the last 3 seasons, the Kentucky football team has won double digits. They have a returning quarterback that's very talented, an offensive line that's going to improve over the course of the year, a defense that is hard-nosed, well-coached, and physical. If you watch Kentucky's defense play against Anthony Richardson in Florida, you saw a team that stays in the right area, that stays at home on defense, that takes good angles when it comes to tackling, that doesn't let the other team break a lot of tackles. A secondary that keeps their hands off the defender but plays tight coverage, that keeps their eyes on the quarterback. Kentucky is a good team. And they're going to be without Chris Rodriguez 2 more weeks. They have a game against Ole Miss. They have to win that one, but I told you if Kentucky can win against Ole Miss and against Florida early, 2 important road games, they have the possibility of hosting an undefeated matchup against Georgia in Lexington. And we're still a long way from that. And Kentucky is always capable of a letdown and losing to a team that they shouldn't have. But they are disciplined, they are well coached, and they are a lot more talented than most people think. I had them at number 10 overall coming into the season. 2 weeks into the season, the AP and the coaches poll have caught up with me. And then there's Tennessee. Tennessee's offense has looked electric. Hendon Hooker has been very good. Their backs have been very good. Their receivers have no problem getting separation. And here's the key. So far, their defense has looked much improved. The defense that was on the field for Tennessee against Pittsburgh looked nothing like the defense that Tennessee put on the field last season. And that's a good thing if you're a Volunteer fan. Because we knew that Josh Heupel could put an offense out there that would score points. We knew that Tennessee can score on anybody in the country. We didn't know if they could stop people. And it looks like they might be able to. In the East, we also see 2 teams in Florida and South Carolina that are improved football teams but still have a ways to go. The media did what the media always does, and they overreact after one game. We told you on this show that Florida would beat Utah. But we also did not have Florida as a top 25 team for a reason. Anthony Richardson is a very good player. He's going to be a tremendous quarterback for the Gators. But he doesn't have very many starts under his belt. He doesn't have a lot of experience, and when you shut down his mobility and you force him to be a pocket passer, you see what happens, at least at this point in his Gator career. He's going to grow. I would love to have him on my team. I would trade half of my roster to have him. But he's not an accurate enough passer to win a game by himself yet. I think Billy Napier has got things going in the right direction for Florida, but they're just not quite there, and neither are the South Carolina Gamecocks. To put it bluntly, they just need more talent. They need more quality depth in order to compete with some of the better teams in the league. They're going to upset somebody this year. They're going to win a game or two that they don't have any business winning. They're going to be tough at home. They're going to play solid, well-coached football. They're going to improve on offense in the passing game. They're going to have to protect the quarterback better, but they're going to improve. They're headed in the right direction, both Florida and South Carolina, as far as programs go, but they're just not there this year. And then there's Vanderbilt and Missouri. Vanderbilt has a huge game coming up for them this weekend, on the road at Northern Illinois. And yes, for Vanderbilt, that is a huge game on the road against Northern Illinois because it's a game that is winnable for them and that they've got to win. I'll give Coach Clark Lee credit. Vanderbilt is better than I thought. I thought they would struggle to win more than a game this year. And I predicted them to go winless in the SEC, and I'm thinking that they might actually win an SEC football game. After watching them a couple weeks, they're better at the quarterback position. They're tackling better, and they're definitely a more competitive team. They're moving in the right direction. They've got to win on Saturday. And Missouri, I don't know what to tell you, Missouri fans. Unless you improve quickly, you might have the worst team in the SEC East this year. You really might, because you went out to Manhattan, Kansas, and got ran. Got ran by a quarterback that never had a winning record at Nebraska. Got ran by a team that does not play in the SEC. You weren't competitive. Your quarterback play is abysmal. Your defense does not look good. And as much as I like Elijah Drinkwitz and think that he is a good, solid football coach, he's just not getting the job done at Mizzou. And if things don't turn around quick, it's gonna be lights out for him, I think. Maybe he gets one more year. But Georgia, Kentucky, and Tennessee are looking really good. Florida and South Carolina are improving but aren't there yet. Vanderbilt is at least playing better. And if you're a Missouri Tiger fan, you're definitely disappointed with the way that your team has shown up so far this year. 3 games that I'm excited about seeing this weekend. The first is Auburn hosting number 22 ranked Penn State. Tigers versus Lions. No Bears, oh my. Penn State has looked like the better football team so far. They beat Ohio 46-10 last week at home, whereas Auburn beat San Jose State 24-16. Penn State is a 3-point favorite. It's going to be an orange out in Jordan-Hare Stadium. And if you've never been to a game in Auburn, Alabama, it's one of the more underrated venues in the country. That stadium gets loud. That fan base makes it difficult for the opposing team. But Penn State has one decided advantage, and that's at quarterback. Penn State has 5th or 6th or 300th year senior Sean Clifford, who, when he's protected, is a solid college quarterback. And like I've already said, Auburn's secondary has really struggled so far this season. If Auburn wants to win, they're going to have to get a lot of pressure on Sean Clifford. They're going to have to force him into a couple of turnovers. And on the other side of the football, what's going to happen for Auburn? Is their offensive line going to create space for Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter, 2 very, very good running backs, but are they going to have any room to run? Can Auburn put a quarterback on the field that doesn't turn the ball over? Can TJ Finley actually throw to a wide receiver, not just to backs and tight ends? Because that's all he did. Last game he threw to backs, tight ends, and the other team. So far this season, TJ Finley's deep balls are nothing but Donalds and Daffies. They're ducks. They're ducks. Are they going to put Robbie Ashford on the field in a big game? Are they going to let him do more than run the football and actually operate as a quarterback for a whole series? Do they trust him to throw the ball against Penn State? This is a key game for Auburn. Before the season, I predicted Auburn to go 8-4. It looks mighty hard for them to get there so far. Their first 5 games are at home. After Penn State, they have Missouri and LSU. If they find a way to win, on Saturday against the Nittany Lions. If they find their footing, if they win this game to improve to 3-0, as ugly as it's looked so far, with the defense they have and the special teams they have a chance to get to 5-0 and still have a good season. But if they lose on Saturday, and ESPN says they only have a 38% chance of winning, if they lose to Penn State on Saturday, a team that's favored over them on the road, it's going to be very interesting to see if the wheels don't come off for Brian Harsin and his crew in Auburn. I'm going to be paying close attention to that football game, even aside from my Auburn fandom, because it really matters for both of those football teams. The second game that I want to pay attention to on Saturday is 12th-ranked BYU at number 25 Oregon. Former Auburn quarterback Bo Nix leading the Ducks, and which Bo Nix will show up in this game against BYU. People had a field day on Twitter mocking Bo Nix, mocking Oregon, celebrating Bo Nix's departure from Auburn after the way that he and the Ducks looked against Georgia in Week 1. Let me just tell you, 8 out of 10 teams that would have played Georgia that Saturday would have looked that bad or worse. Yes, Bo Nix made some boneheaded throws and things that you cannot do as a senior who has started 4 years in college football. But Oregon was so overwhelmed on the offensive and defensive lines against Georgia, they couldn't match up. Okay, they did not have a chance. Most teams would have looked that bad. This last week, Oregon played an FCS opponent, and Bo Nix threw for nearly 300 yards and 5 touchdowns. The real Bo Nix is somewhere in between each of those performances. Okay. Most games this year, Bo Nix is going to look much better than he did against Georgia. He's going to be able to operate that offense. He's going to be able to use his legs. He's going to be able to hit some wide open receivers in the Pac-12 that he didn't get a chance to throw to in the SEC at Auburn. But I am curious to see how he and his team look against BYU, who has performed very well early in this season. This is a BYU team that beat Baylor 26-20 last week, and they did so without their 2 leading wide receivers. This is a BYU team that we had ranked coming into the season. They're ranked 12th in the AP now. They were way back, if ranked at all, in other polls. We had them ranked in the top 25 to start the season. This is a BYU team that has major college football conference bodies on their offensive and defensive line. A team whose defense looks much better than anticipated. A team that's very well coached. A team that still has Notre Dame, Arkansas, Boise State, and Stanford on their schedule. Keep an eye on BYU. If BYU can figure out a way to win this game at Oregon on the road, things become very interesting for Cougar fans. Notre Dame is certainly susceptible. Arkansas looks very, very good, and Boise State and Stanford aren't very good this year, but at least they are known teams. BYU did a phenomenal job of scheduling this year. Their last year as an independent team, they put a lot of quality teams on their schedule. They're not backing down. They're not afraid. And they're giving themselves a chance if they can run the table. Now, they could also lose 3 out of the next 5. But that's a game that I definitely want to see. Oregon has their second chance at a top 25 team. Have they improved? How is Dan Lanning doing as a head coach? And how will BYU manage this stretch in their schedule? The last game that I'm for sure watching this weekend is Mississippi State at LSU. I want to see how LSU responds to the disappointment and to the adversity and losing the first game of the year to FSU, the way that they lost it with every opportunity to win. How do they respond to that? Does Brian Kelly have a hold of his football team? Are they going to be more disciplined on defense? Can they win a home game, an important game, the first game in their SEC schedule? Will Mississippi State have a letdown? They should win this game. They are the better football team this year. This doesn't happen often where Mississippi State is the better football team than LSU, but they are this year. Can Mike Leach's team get the job done on the road? They beat an improving Arizona team on the road last week in a Pac-12 after dark game, and this week they have to do it in Tiger Stadium. They're favored by 2.5 points. Can they get the job done? So those are the 3 games I'm watching this weekend. Auburn versus number 22 Penn State, number 12 BYU at number 25 Oregon, and Mississippi State at LSU. Let's take a look at our solid 7 picks this week. Last week in our In the Shed with Wes Anderson solid 7, we went 3-4 against the spread. We had a losing weekend, our second such weekend of the season. We currently stand at 48%. Our success rate is 48%. It's less than half, my babies, for all of you math majors. We're on the climb on our way to 53% at least for the year, because that's what it would take for us to be in the money. And I feel good about my picks this week. And I feel good about my season. Because last year, the first 7 or 8 weeks of the season, we were on fire. We got up to almost 62%, 60%, 57%. And then we crashed and burned. So the fact that we're starting off slow this year, this season, is probably a good thing, I'm going to say. So here are my picks for this week. I'm taking UConn plus 47.5 points at Michigan. UConn is not good, but they have a good football coach in Jim Moore Jr. They do look like a better team. They have been scoring. They've already got 1 win for the year. And I just think that maybe they can put enough points on the board in a blowout loss to lose by less than 47.5 points to Michigan. I'm going with UConn plus 47.5. I'm also taking Oklahoma minus 11 on the road at Nebraska. Of course, the Cornhuskers have fired their coach, embattled coach Scott Frost. The former Cornhusker quarterback just could not get the job done. I think 23 or 24 of his 30 or 31 losses at the program as the head coach came in one-possession games. And that's the only thing that gives me some pause. So far, Oklahoma in their first year with head coach Brent Venables has looked like a good team. Transfer quarterback from UCF, Dylan Gabriel, has lit it up for the Sooners. But Nebraska has a tendency to just barely lose. And it is a home game. And maybe with their head coach being fired, they're going to rally together and keep it closer. A lot of people are saying the smart money is on Nebraska. So I'm going the other way. I'm taking Oklahoma minus 11. I'm rolling with Dylan Gabriel. Another game that's very interesting, I'm taking California plus 11 on the road at Notre Dame. California is 2-0 on the season, and the Golden Bears haven't really played anybody of note. But Notre Dame hasn't won yet. And Notre Dame's starting quarterback is out for the season. And there is a lot of pressure on their coaching staff right now, and Marcus Freeman, first-time head coach, to win a football game. They lost their bowl game where he was the coach. They lost both of their games this year. They've looked very good. They have a lot of talent. And I'm going to say that California, even in a loss, keeps it closer than 11. And they lose by 7 or by 8 or by 10, and they cover the spread. California plus 11 on the road at Notre Dame. Another underdog I'm going with is Georgia Tech plus 16.5 versus Ole Miss. It's a home game for the Rambling Wreck. And I do think that Georgia Tech will be on the bottom half of the ACC rankings, but I'm not sold on Ole Miss yet. I'm not sold on their defense. I don't know about their quarterback. It is a road game for them. If they turn the ball over a time or two, I still expect Ole Miss to win. But I'm going with the Yellow Jackets to cover the spread at 16.5 points. I'm taking Georgia Tech. Another road dog I'm taking, the Vanderbilt Commodores plus 2.5 at Northern Illinois. I think Vanderbilt wins outright against the Salukis on the road. I cannot believe I just said the words, I think Vanderbilt wins outright. They look better. They look like an improved team. They scored 63 points, and like I said, I don't care if it was against a Hawaii team that's in complete rebuild mode. For Vanderbilt to score 63 points on anybody is monumental right now. They have an athletic quarterback. They seem to be tackling better. They were competitive for most of the game against a good Wake Forest team and Sam Hartman last week. I'm going to say that Vanderbilt goes on the road and beats Northern Illinois. I'm taking Vandy. I'm betting on Vandy football. I'm also taking Mississippi State on the road at Tiger Stadium as a 2.5-point favorite. And this could be an opportunity for a letdown for Mike Leach and his team, but I just think Mississippi State right now is the better football team. And I'm picking them to cover. And then I'm also taking the USC Trojans minus 12 points at home versus Fresno State. Look, this is an annual West Coast game that I like to watch because Fresno State is not afraid of USC. They love to play USC. They get up for this game. And Fresno State is an underrated football team, but USC is better. They have more talent. They got things rolling with Caleb Williams in the offense. They've got a coaching staff that's got them fired up right now. The fan base is on cloud nine with USC being a top 10 ranked football team again. For the first time in a while, football matters again in Los Angeles. And I think it will be close for a good portion of the game, but I think USC scores a couple touchdowns in the third quarter and pulls away. I'm taking USC minus 12. So those are my In the Shed with Wes Anderson solid 7 picks. I'll put them up on Twitter tonight. I'm taking UConn plus 47.5 at Michigan, Oklahoma minus 11 at Nebraska, California plus 11 at Notre Dame, Georgia Tech plus 16.5 versus Ole Miss, Vanderbilt plus 2.5 at Northern Illinois, Mississippi State minus 2.5 at LSU, and USC minus 12 versus Fresno State. We're at 48% on the year so far, but I think will be improved after this weekend. Moving on to football of the professional variety, the NFL season is underway, my babies. That's right, professional football is back again. Praise be to 6-pound, 8-ounce, little baby Jesus. In case you missed week 1 of the NFL season, let me catch you up quickly. Aaron Rodgers looked terrible. The Bears actually won a game. It turns out the Chiefs are pretty good again. The Giants rolled the dice and won with a 2-point conversion. And even with Baker Mayfield, the Panthers still suck. That's my NFL Week 1 recap. There are 3 stories in the NFL worth watching this week. The first is that Dak is out, and so are the Cowboys. Dak is out, and so are the Cowboys. Quarterback Dak Prescott got injured in the first game, a 19-3 loss against octogenarian Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. Dak Prescott is expected to be out at least 6 weeks with a thumb injury that he's already had surgery to correct. And every other team in the Cowboys division started off the season with a win. The Giants, the New York Football Giants, won a game with a 2-point conversion. Saquon Barkley actually looked like a top 5 draft pick and a quality running back for the first time since his rookie season. The Washington Commanders, despite having the worst name in all of professional sports possibly, won a game. And the Eagles looked good in beating the Lions. And the Cowboys start their season with a 19-3 loss and losing their starting quarterback for several weeks. And look, it's not like they lost 19-3 to 45-year-old Tom Brady because Dak Prescott got hurt. He played most of the game, and he did not play well. The offensive line looked like a mess for Dallas. They weren't able to run the ball consistently. Their receivers weren't getting separation. Their defense couldn't consistently stop Tom Brady. And even though they played well in the red zone and forced a lot of field goals, the Buccaneers were just too much. And so America's team, quote-unquote, the Dallas Cowboys that get talked about every week ad nauseum on ESPN and on FS1 and on Fox Sports Radio and ESPN Radio, I'm going to go ahead and tell you their season is over. And I don't want to hear about them anymore. I don't want to hear about Dak Prescott's rehab. I don't want to talk about the revamped defense. I don't want to talk about the possibility of the head coach getting fired and replaced with Sean Payton next season. I'm done. I'm done with the Cowboys this year. Can we just be honest? Dak is out, and so are the Cowboys. The Cowboys do not have a chance of making the playoffs, even if Cooper Rush plays well and they split and go 3-3 over the next 6 weeks. They're not making the playoffs this season. They're not winning their division. They don't have a team that is talented enough. And Jerry Jones can go on radio every week and he can say whatever he wants to and he can grab headlines and none of it matters at all. Dak is out and so are the Cowboys. Let's keep it 100 and let's move on. The second story worth watching, Russell Wilson is good and the Broncos will be fine. Russell Wilson is good and the Broncos will be fine. Listen. I know that the Seahawks won. I know that they beat the Broncos 17-16. The Broncos gave up a lot to trade for Russell Wilson. He's supposed to be the savior of the franchise and lead them to a Super Bowl win. And they're going to make the playoffs this year. They've got a good receiving core and a defense and a first-year head coach that's offensive-minded. And they lost to Geno Smith. And Pete Carroll was dancing around on the sidelines, looking 53 instead of 73 because he's so laid back and he loves to surf. And the national media, the Broncos, Russell Wilson should have made his team let him go for it on 4th and 5. Why did the Broncos try to kick a 64-yard field goal? How dumb is their first-year head coach? What a failure. Like Aaron Rodgers said a few years ago, R-E-L-A-X. Relax. It's Russell Wilson's first game in a Bronco uniform. The first game for a brand new head coach. The first game working with that offensive line, with that blocking scheme, with that running back, with that group of receivers in an NFL game. And he happens to be playing against another team who, for them and for their head coach, this is their Super Bowl. Fans that should have cheered him but booed him. A stadium that wanted him to lose so badly. A quarterback that was his backup for a couple of years and that finally had his chance to do his thing. Of course they lost this game. It's not that big of a surprise if you look at everything that there was to consider. And they lost by a point. On the road. In week 1. And they didn't play well. But if you don't think that Russell Wilson is a very good NFL quarterback, if you don't realize that he is elite at that position, if you think that he is not going to do well in a Bronco uniform, that they made a bad trade, or that his career is on the descent, you've got another thing coming in my book. Russell Wilson is still very good, and the Broncos will be fine. The third NFL story to watch is that the Dolphins might be a good football team. Are we sure? Are we serious that they hired a young, up-and-coming, offensive-minded head coach? They actually traded to shore up the offensive line, to give Tua a receiving threat like Tyreek Hill, and maybe the Dolphins are actually good? Yeah, maybe they are. The Dolphins topped the Patriots 20-7, and for whatever reason, Tua Tagovailoa, since he's been in the NFL, has played pretty well against Bill Belichick's teams. But this game, they were absolutely dominant. They were dominant on defense. They were dominant on special teams. They were dominant on offense. All three phases of the game. Bill Belichick and his esteemed coaching staff had no answers. Tua played well, going 23 for 33 for 270 yards and a touchdown. He did not turn the ball over. Tyreek Hill looked like Tyreek Hill. And the Dolphins might actually be a very good football team this year. Yeah, shout out to Christopher Huckle. He's on cloud 9 right now. That's my fraternity brother. He's like 6'7", and he's an incredibly nice human being. He looks terrifying because he's so tall, and you're like, oh my gosh, he could crush me. But then he just wants to uplift you and encourage you. And he's a Dolphins fan. And he'll be very happy with their week 1 performance. And I'm just saying the Dolphins might actually have figured something out in Miami. And I'm here for it. So those are 3 stories from week 1 that are worth watching. If you've listened to the show for a while, you know that when the NFL season kicks off, one thing that we do here on In the Shed is we make 7 bold predictions about the NFL season that are sure to be wrong. They're sure to be wrong because they are by nature very bold predictions. I think last year we got 3 or 4 out of 7 right, which was darn near clairvoyant. So anyway, here are this year's 7 bold predictions that are sure to be wrong. Number 1, Tom Brady will be sacked more times this season than years he's been on the earth. If you watched Tampa Bay's win over the Cowboys, the one thing that was extremely concerning if you are a Buccaneer fan was that offensive line. One of their best offensive linemen retired in the offseason. Another was traded. A guy that they drafted to be a replacement got hurt, and then now his backup in the first game got hurt, and they are in trouble. Tom Brady is 45 years old. He is not mobile. Last year, Joe Burrow led the league in times that he was sacked at 51, and I think Tom Brady might be sacked more times than years he's been on the earth this season, more than 45. Prediction number 2, Matt Rule will be fired before week 14. That's my prediction. I think that Carolina looked better than last year. I think that Baker Mayfield is a modest upgrade at quarterback for them. Christian McCaffrey is dynamic. Their defense is okay, is fairly good, is decent, is solid. But they're just not good enough. And Matt Rule is not good enough. And the offensive line is not good enough. And they play in a division where they don't stack up roster-wise. I think Matt Rule will be fired by week 14 of this season. Prediction number 3, the Chargers will not make the playoffs. Yeah. You might think this is an overreaction to last night's game, the Thursday night football game in which they lost a close one late to the Chiefs. And it probably is. But I'm predicting the Chargers will not make the playoffs, and I've been toying with this prediction for a couple weeks in all reality. Because everybody is so high on the Chargers. Everybody talks about how top to bottom they have one of the best 3 or 4 rosters in all of professional football. Nothing but positives for Justin Herbert. He's such an electric quarterback. Even we ranked him as the 10th best quarterback in the league. But they never seem to get over the hump. They never seem to live up to potential. They're the second most relevant team in their own city. When they play home games, the visiting team has more fans there than theirs on a regular basis. I just don't think they're going to live up to the hype. Even with a good roster, even with a good quarterback. I'm saying the Chargers will not make the playoffs. Prediction number 4, Justin Fields will account for more touchdowns this season than Trey Lance. I think he will. I think Justin Fields will account for more touchdowns this season for the Bears than Trey Lance will for the 49ers. The 49ers unquestionably have more talent, a better roster, and a better, more proven head football coach. But I think Justin Fields will provide more for his team. I'm not sold on Trey Lance. I wasn't sold on him when they drafted him. He does have talent, but his mechanics need a lot of work. He's not ready to be a starter in the NFL. I think he's going to have an up and down season. He's going to look like a rookie. Meanwhile, I think Justin Fields will take a couple steps forward. He'll have to carry the brunt of the offense for the Bears. He'll be counted on to do a lot, and I think he's going to have some bad games and some good ones, but I think he produces more touchdowns than does Trey Lance. Bold prediction number 5, the Falcons and Marcus Mariota will win more football games total than Matt Ryan and the Colts. And if I am correct on this one, I will be the only person in the world to have been correct on this one. People were saying that Matt Ryan might be the missing piece for Indianapolis, that they will challenge for their division title, that they will be a playoff team, that they're going to be a team that might be under the radar when it comes to teams that perform higher than expected this season. And I'm saying that the Falcons and Marcus Mariota, the team that Matt Ryan left, will actually do better as far as total wins. It's a bold prediction. It's probably going to be wrong, but that's how I see it. Let's see what happens. Bold prediction number 6, Josh Allen wins MVP. And this is certainly plausible. I don't know that this is one of the more bold ones on the list. After the first 2 weeks, it might be bold to say anybody not named Patrick Mahomes wins the MVP. But I'm going with Josh Allen. I'm putting my flag in the ground early. I'm saying that he's going to win the NFL MVP. I think he's going to have a tremendous season for a very good football team. And prediction number 7, the Arizona Cardinals win 9 games or fewer this year. Last year, Arizona got off to a very good start in the first half of the season. They looked like one of the best teams in the league. They added J.J. Watt in the offseason. They shored up their defense a little bit, added some quality depth, re-signed Kyler Murray, and then lost in week 1. Last year, they went 11-6. Their division has gotten much better. They play in a tough division. And I think that the Cardinals win 9 or fewer games, and I'm even leaning toward fewer than 9. But I don't think that they win double-digit games this year after going 11-6 last year. I think that the first half of their season this year won't be as good as their first half was last year, and I expect a similar second half season collapse for the Cardinals. I think they win 9 games or fewer. So those are my In the Shed with Wes Anderson 7 bold predictions for this NFL season that are sure to be wrong. Tom Brady will be sacked more times than years he's had on this earth. Matt Rule will be fired before Week 14. The Chargers will not make the playoffs. Justin Fields will account for more touchdowns this season than Trey Lance. The Falcons and Marcus Mariota will win more games than Matt Ryan and the Colts. Josh Allen wins the MVP. And the Arizona Cardinals win 9 games or fewer. Let me know what you think about those 7 bold predictions. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Get at us on Twitter at intheshed4. I would love to read your responses on air. That's all for the world of sports. Let's get to this, the news in the world of the paranormal, where our first story takes us to Poland. Archaeologists discovered a 17th century Polish vampire with a sickle around its neck meant to prevent a return from the dead. That's right, my babies. We're going to Poland to talk vampires right after NFL and college football, because that's how we roll on this show, okay? That's what you come to this shed for, because you're interested in politics, because you love some sports, and because you want to hear about Bigfoot and UFOs and vampires. And nobody covers vampires like we do on this program. Nobody in the world, my tools. Certainly nobody that can be heard throughout the wonderful nation of India, who I love. Shout out to India. I love you, India. Put me on a billboard in India. I want to be on a billboard in India. The skeletal remains of what may have been a female vampire were found in a 17th century Polish graveyard with a sickle across its neck to prevent the woman from rising from the dead. Professor Darius Polinsky, nailed it, from Nicholas Copernicus University headed up the archaeological dig that led to the discovery of the skeleton, the Daily Mail reported Friday. The sickle was not laid flat but placed on the neck in such a way that if the deceased had tried to get up, most likely the head would have been cut off or injured, Polinsky told the Daily Mail. The remains discovered in the village of Pian near Ostrymko, Poland, appeared to be of a young woman buried in the 17th century. That's the 1600s for the uninitiated. According to a press release seen by Insider. Traces of a silk cap on her head suggested that she was from a higher social status per the Daily Mail. Of course she was from a higher social status. Poor people not out here raising from the dead. We ain't even got health care when we alive. Of course it was a rich vampire. Of course it was.
Vampirism is not just for the top 1%.
I love this show. I'm so glad that you listened to it. A triangular padlock was placed around the big toe on her left foot, an indicator that the people who buried the woman were concerned that she may rise from the grave, perhaps because they thought she was a vampire. The remains, which were discovered last month, are being further investigated by scientists. The practice of vampire burial spanned Christian Europe from as early as the 14th century all the way to the 17th century, Matteo Barini, principal lecturer of forensic anthropology at the Liverpool John Moore University, told Insider. Outbreaks of vampires were often associated with times when people were dying from causes that could not be explained with the science of the time, like a pandemic or a mass poisoning, he said. These vampires start to hunt and kill family members first, then the neighbors, and then all the other village. This is the classical pattern of a disease that is contagious, he said. Barini discovered the remains of a woman in Venice who died in the 16th century, which he showed through careful scientific examination was a vampire burial site. The remains were found in a mass grave filled with victims of the plague. This body had a stone placed carefully in its mouth. The belief at the time was that people could become Noxerers, vampires that chewed through their shrouds and rose from the dead to bite the living and spread the plague around, he said. Later on, as the lore evolved, people believed that vampires were rising from the dead and strangling people at night. Barini said this may be a way to explain the chest pain caused by the leading cause of death in Europe at the time, tuberculosis. It's only in Victorian times that vampires were said to bite the neck and suck the blood, a trope that was used in books at the time as a sort of metaphor for sex, said Barini. Did not know that. Did not make that connection. This is a family show. Barini said more research is needed to confirm that this was the burial of someone suspected to be a vampire. There were many superstitions surrounding death in Europe at the time, and not all of them had to do with vampires, he said. Bodies had been found locked into their final resting place, nailed to the bottom of the grave, with stones weighing down their feet or with thorns of roses on their graves. These were all ways to keep the body from rising up that didn't necessarily have to do with vampirism, he said. The sickle could mean something completely different, though. For instance, a 2015 paper looking at remains buried in Poland with sickles around various parts of the body reviewed cases in which historians suggested that the tools used in agriculture could be a sign of social status. Bodies that were clearly thought at risk of being vampires had been found with stakes through their heart, beheaded, burned, or with stones in their mouth, Barini said. The fact that the feet were locked in the grave is something well known, not necessarily for vampires, but for all the situations in which we had fear that the person was coming back, he said. Very interesting. So, over in Poland, they may have found a lady suspected of being a vampire because she was buried with a sickle over her neck and a lock around her big toe. I would think she would have to be suspected of being a vampire or some sort of monster, because otherwise, why would her family not want her to come back from the dead? That's my question. If you don't have a certain level of fear about this person's intentions or of what they plan to do to you, why would you prevent them from coming back from the dead? If it was my loved one who passed away and there was a chance that they would come back from the dead, I would be like, hey, let's make it as easy as possible. Let's bury them with a shovel or a trowel in their hand. Let's give them every opportunity to escape. Let's bring them back so they can be with us once again like Lazarus. But if I thought they might be a vampire or some other type of monster, hey, we finna get sickled up in this grave. We finna lock some big toes. We finna fill some mouths with some rocks or some heavy stones. I'm with you. So I think this probably was someone suspected of being a vampire, and the whole correlation between suspected vampirism and plagues is one that I've always found to be very interesting, very thought-provoking. That at the time, science could not explain certain pandemics or mass deaths or some of the symptoms that people were experiencing, and so mythologies such as vampirism sprang up. But I also know that there are a lot of things that cannot be explained, and that this type of mythology is something that has existed all over the world, but especially in Europe for a long time. And there are people in certain neck of the woods in Eastern Europe, in rural areas, or even in South America, Central America, in rural areas that still swear that there is something going on that we can't explain, where people are coming back from the dead, where things are happening. We did a story very, very early on in this show about vampirism, about different types of vampires, about people who claim to be vampires today, and what that actually means and what that looks like and how they practice it. It's kind of creepy. It's kind of spooky. It's deeply interesting. And I love to learn about historical myths and how these things originated, how they can possibly be explained. That's one part about investigating or looking at the paranormal that's very important, is keeping an open mind, yes, and realizing that not all things can be explained by science, yes, but also being willing to explain the things that we can explain. And being willing to honestly take a look at something and say, hey, this is what's going on here. We can see what this was really about. And if we can explain it, then let's explain it. If we can bear out the facts, then let's bear out the facts. But archaeologists have a very cool job and fun job, and one that's of importance and offers value to our society and our understanding of history and to education and to research. And in Poland, they think they found a vampire. And it could be a mythical vampire, a suspected vampire, or maybe it's something else. But whatever the case, we can bet that that person was probably rich. It ain't no poor vampires out here in these streets. They from the wealthy class. We ain't got health care. Vampirism is just for the top 1%. I digress. From Poland to Pennsylvania we go for our second story. Raining deer? Residents want action as deer keep falling to their deaths in Johnsonburg. A disturbing case of deer jumping to their death has residents in one Elk County town demanding something be done to stop it. 6 News went to the town and got some answers from government agencies on what could be done. For the town of Johnsonburg, the snow may have stopped falling from the sky, but for some residents it continues to rain deer. As you can see in the background, there's a deer that has jumped off this bypass, explained residents Bill Boylan, referring to the US 219 bypass that runs through the town. Recently, since we lived on the other side of the bypass, we've had 25 deer jump to their death in a populated area. That end of the bypass is probably more dangerous than any other area because that's the only place that it crosses over a populated area. Boylan and other residents tell 6 News that they've tried reaching out to the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, but say they did not get the response they were hoping for. PennDOT apparently doesn't see the wisdom of putting maybe a diversion fence for the deer, or maybe some nets to catch all the debris that come off the snowplows that plow it over, said Boylan. We've contacted PennDOT on different occasions. Also, the Game Commission. The Game Commission's been very cooperative, Boylan said. Without some sort of barrier, Boylan says the deer will most likely continue to jump. What happens is here, the deer could very easily be diverted. If they would put up a fence on the point of this hill, they come down off of here, they get frightened out onto the bypass, Boylan said. They panic, one jumps off, and then they all leap off together. Julie Patasak, another concerned resident, also reached out to the state and regional game commissions. She says they pointed her to PennDOT. She also says that she feels this could impact the hunting season in the region also. All of them are doe, and that's, potentially could have been how many more deer populating if they wouldn't have died. They're the mothers to carry the baby deer, said Patasak. And with the warming weather, she fears the bodies will start to stink. But they're literally jumping to death, explained Patasak, and that, to me, looking at them, it's disturbing. 6 News reached out to PennDOT about the situation. They tell 6 News that they are now looking at it. We started taking a look at it, trying to really determine where the deer are coming from. How are they ending up on that bridge is really the problem we've got to solve first before we can determine if there's anything we can do or not, said District Executive Tom Zarat. He says PennDOT became aware of the deer only 2 weeks ago and that they had a conversation with their people a week ago about the issue. So I'd say the next couple of weeks we'll try to get an answer together and, try to go out and at least get an idea of what's going on and what's causing the problem, said Zarat. We understand where they're coming from, and we'll look into it, and we'll see if there's something that we can do to that, that involves the roadway, that we can make it, safer for the animals and obviously anybody that's a resident in the area. So yeah, we'll definitely take a look at it, and we'll see what we can do. So, yeah, in this random Pennsylvania town, they've got 20 plus deer over the course of several weeks or a couple months that have just jumped off of the bypass to their death in a populated area below. And that's bizarre. And in this segment of the news, we share stories that cannot necessarily be explained, that we don't yet understand, or that are bizarre, and that need answers. So I'm sharing a story with you about it raining deer. Imagine being below, and you just see a couple doe fall from the sky. That's an interesting afternoon, and you might have found dinner. Obviously, this is a situation that can be explained by science, but has not yet, as to what is causing them to be on this overpass. What is causing them to get so spooked by traffic and to jump over? Is it an issue with their vision, their periphery, their senses? What's going on in this area that's leading to this? I don't know. But it certainly needs to be addressed because it creates a dangerous situation. It creates a situation where wildlife is dying at a rate that's not natural for reasons that could easily be prevented, but also it creates a dangerous situation for anybody below, for anybody walking, driving by, for the population that exists below this overpass. That's a recipe for disaster. And it appears as though PennDOT was very slow to address it. They say they only heard about it a couple weeks ago. That's not what people in the town said. But at least with some news coverage, it's going to be addressed now. And I thought that was such a bizarre story. 26 deer in a small amount of time, jumping to their death. And I thought it was worth sharing on the show. From Pennsylvania, we go to the universe for our next story. Maybe the universe thinks. Hear me out. That's right, my babies. We about to get a Bill Walton level of trippy in my shed this morning. Maybe the universe thinks. Hear me out. Our universe contains about 200 billion galaxies, and my sources say that is a lot. These galaxies are not uniformly distributed. Under the pull of gravity, they lump into clusters, and the clusters form superclusters. Between these clusters, galaxies align along thin threads, the galactic fragments, which can be several 100 million light years long. And my sources say that is very long. Galactic clusters and filaments are surrounded by voids that contain very little matter. Altogether, the cosmic web looks somewhat like a human brain. To be more precise, the distribution of matter in the universe looks like the connectome, the network of nerve connections in the human brain. Neurons in the human brain too form clusters, and they connect by axons that are long nerve fibers which send electrical impulses from one neuron to another. The resemblance between the human brain and the universe is not entirely superficial. It has been rigorously analyzed in a 2020 study by the Italian astrophysicist Franco Vazza and neuroscientist Alberto Folletti. They calculated how many structures of different sizes are in the human brain's connectome and in the cosmic web and reported a remarkable similarity. Brain samples on scales below about 1 millimeter and the distribution of matter in the universe up to about 300 million light years, they found, are structurally similar. Could it be then that the universe is a giant brain in which our galaxy is merely one neuron? Maybe we're witnessing its self-reflection while we pursue our own thoughts. Is your mind blown yet, my babies? Onward. Sure, we don't know what consciousness is, but we do know that the only things we're reasonably confident can think, brains, have a lot of connections and send a lot of information back and forth through those connections. Even leaving aside that we don't understand consciousness, high connectivity and rapid signaling seem conducive to thinking. That the universe is structurally similar to the brain then raises the question of whether it has similar thinking capacities. The universe, however, is different from the human brain in a number of ways, notably because it expands, and its expansion is speeding up. If galaxy clusters were the universe's neurons, then they'd be flying apart from each other with ever-increasing speed, and they have been doing so for some billions of years already. Another important difference is that it takes a long time for signals to cross the universe. Neurons in the human brain send about 5 to 50 signals per second. Most of these signals, around 80%, are short distance going only about 1 millimeter, but about 20% are long distance connecting different parts of the brain. We need both to think. The signals in our brain travel at about 100 meters per second, 1,000,000 times slower than the speed of light. But the brain is small and it takes only fractions of seconds for signals to zip around it. The universe, in contrast, is presently some 90 billion light years in diameter, and as Albert Einstein taught us, nothing travels faster than the speed of light. This means if one side of the hypothetical universe brain wanted to at least take note of its other side, it would take 90 billion years even at the speed of light. And sending a single signal to our nearest neuron, the galaxy cluster M81, would take about 11 million years at least. This means that optimistically the universe might have managed about 1,000 exchanges between its nearest neurons since the Big Bang. If we leave the long-range connections entirely aside, that's about as much as our brain does in 3 minutes. And the capacity of the universe to connect with itself decreases with its expansion, so it'll go downhill from here on. This means if the universe is thinking, it isn't thinking very much. For most physicists, this is the end of the story. But what if the universe isn't as big as it seems? Researchers at the Google-owned company DeepMind recently taught physics to an artificial intelligence. Why did they do that? I am already out on this. I am not a fan. Why are you teaching physics to artificial intelligence? Have you not seen iRobot starring Chris Rock slapping Will Smith? And that is an adjective. That's not, he doesn't slap him in the movie. I used it as a way to describe who Will Smith was, in case you've forgotten, because he's been out of the public eye after he slapped Chris Rock. I am so against teaching artificial intelligence anything. I digress. They fed the computer program hours of videos, and it learned, among other things, that objects don't spontaneously disappear, they always continuously move from one place to nearby places. In physics, we call this locality. It's one of the most basic properties of nature, and it's among those things that we understand the least. It's not only that we don't understand why the universe respects locality. We're not sure that locality remains valid in the subatomic realm. If it doesn't, then that could have profound consequences. It could be that space itself has many more connections than we observe, non-local ones, not unlike portals. You go in one end and you're instantly teleported to a different place. And now I'm back in, because teleportation is something that I am all for. Teleport me to India, put me on a billboard in India. I want to be on a billboard in India. These non-local connections would have to be very small, though, too small for us or even elementary particles to go through. Dang. Otherwise, we'd have noticed already. But they would still connect space with itself. This way, two places we think are at opposite ends of the universe might actually be very close to each other. The universe would only seemingly be large an illusion born out of our limited perception. My colleagues in physics are speculating about this for several reasons. First, we know that quantum effects can create strong non-local connections between particles. This entanglement, as it's called, is what gives quantum computers their edge. It's also our second Will Smith reference of the article. Entanglement doesn't allow non-local transfer of information, but it tells us that the familiar locality of balls rolling down inclined planes isn't all there is to say. We also know that Einstein's theory of gravity contains wormholes that are shortcuts between places which appear far away. While large wormholes can't exist in our universe because they would close immediately, what wormholes would do in the quantum realm, no one really knows. To find out, we would need a theory for the quantum properties of space, which despite 80 plus years of search, we still don't have. Quite possibly, however, quantum wormholes give rise to non-local connections. Finally, there's the issue that black holes can destroy information. Once you have crossed the event horizon, it seems you need to move faster than light to get back out. But a non-local connection across the horizon would also get information out. Some physicists have even suggested that dark matter, a hypothetical type of matter that supposedly makes up 85% of matter in the universe, is really misattribution. There may be only normal matter, it's just that its gravitational attraction is multiplied and spread out because places are non-locally connected to each other. A non-locally connected universe hence would make sense for many reasons. If these speculations are correct, the universe might be full of tiny portals that connect seemingly distant places. The physicists Fanti Markopoulou and Lee Smolin estimated that our universe could contain as much as 10 to the 360th power of such non-local connections. And since the connections are non-local anyway, it doesn't matter that they expand with the universe. The human brain, for comparison, has a measly 10 to the 15th power connections. Let me be clear that there's absolutely zero evidence that non-local connections exist, or that if they did exist, they'd indeed allow the universe to think. But we cannot rule this possibility out either. Crazy as it sounds, the idea that the universe is intelligent is compatible with all we know so far. I've made a name, for better or worse, by debunking nonsense physics headlines. That's anything from the alleged observation of negative mass, no such thing, to messaging faster than light with the quantum internet, you can't, to contact with parallel universes, I assure you we haven't had any. But as more of my colleagues are out there with me on social media debunking fake science news, I have found that we paint a one-sided picture. Science has more to say than nope, you can't. It also opens our minds to new possibilities, new sources of wonder, and new ways to make sense of our own existence. The universe might think, the Big Bang might repeat, and copies of you might live in parallel worlds. Those are all possibilities which we found in our theories in physics. They're not supported by evidence, and they might never be, but they're not contradicted by evidence either, and those are stories that deserve to be told, too. So, the organization of our universe is very similar to that of the human brain on a massively larger scale. I've never heard this before. I've never read this before. I've never heard this discussed. And maybe you are more well-versed in science, and in physics, and in theoretical physics, and maybe you did not get lost in that article like I did. I'm just a simple man in his backyard in Alabama, in his shed, on a Friday morning. Haven't even had all my coffee yet, okay? But the idea that the universe might be, dare I say in some ways, alive and intelligent, and able to communicate with itself or with things around it is mind-boggling. And it's certainly something that inspires awe. And it's interesting that theoretical physicists are toying with such ideas that in my mind don't go against issues of faith, that aren't contrary to science, that don't stand against the existence of the paranormal, but almost seem like a bridge to all of those things. And almost seem like a tie between all of them. Because such things are possible in our universe and science can conceive of them. Granted, there is not proof proving that the universe is intelligent. But there is the possibility without evidence that contradicts it. And I found that to be incredibly noteworthy and worth sharing. Parts of the article were jargon, parts of it were too wordy, parts of it were hard to understand. For me, at least, you're probably smarter than I. But the overall premise I understand. And the idea that the universe may not even be as big as we think it is because these non-localized ways of transporting information from one part of the universe to the other, that's a fun idea. That's an interesting idea. And it's certainly thought-provoking. It creates the possibility of new realms, of new realities, and of all kinds of sci-fi things to be true and real and present. And so I wanted to share that on the show this week. What do you think of that story? What do you make of this theory, of this idea that the universe may be intelligent? It may be able to communicate with itself. Do you buy it? Do you think there's any stock in it? Do you dismiss it outright? Is it lore? Is it sci-fi? Is it a silly theory? Or is it valid? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Get at us on Twitter at intheshed4. I would love to hear from you. From the unexplorable universe to the unexplored deep sea we go for our last story. The legend of the black demon shark. We all like to indulge in a good fish tale, especially when that fish is a shark. The legend of El Demonio Negro, the black demon, has persisted for as long as people entered the waters of the Gulf of California, also known as the Sea of Cortez between the Baja Peninsula and the state of Sonora. For those who tell the tale, the black demon is said to be a shark as long as a school bus, reaching lengths of 50 feet or more. Its skin is as black as midnight and piercing eyes are somehow even darker. It overturns boats, attacks whales, and swallows entire groups of sea lions in a single bite. Those who've seen it describe a long whip-like tail that can be seen churning waves at the surface. Even though the legend of the black demon has been passed down for generations, there's never been a verifiable incident or photographic evidence. No physical evidence has been found that would prove the creature's existence either, although believers often point to the half-eaten carcasses of whales that sometimes wash ashore in the area. In 2009, the TV series Monster Quest dispatched a film crew to the Sea of Cortez to investigate the claims from American sport fisherman Eric Mack, who was sailing off the coast of Baja in July of 2008 when he encountered an unidentified creature that met the legend's description. Although the crew never found proof of its existence, the show aired on March 18, 2009, during an episode called Mega Jaws. One common origin for the myth is that the shark is actually a megalodon, a prehistoric predator that could grow to lengths of up to 60 feet. The biggest flaw with this explanation is that despite its appearance in pop culture, the megalodon has been extinct for over 2.5 million years. Another possible explanation is that the shark is actually a hypermelanistic great white that has been able to grow to its fullest adult potential. Hypermelanism is the overabundance of melanin, the opposite of albinism, which can cause animals to have darker skin than usual. This condition has been observed in some species of cat sharks and rays, so it may be possible that it could occur with great whites, which can reach over 20 feet. Melanism might be a factor for whale sharks, which normally have a very distinct skin pattern, being mistaken for the legendary predator. Whale sharks can reach lengths of up to 40 feet and often can be seen creating massive waves with their tails at the surface of the water. Whale sharks, however, would not qualify as vicious predators as they're filter feeders, which eat krill and other tiny fish and pose absolutely no threat to humans. No matter what the explanation for the continued sightings, it's most likely a case of exaggeration, something that seafaring people have done for centuries. Whatever the case, the cryptozoic black demon is a wonderful fishtale that will likely be told for generations to come. So yeah, the legend of the black demon shark. This is a legend that has been passed down for generations. It's something that is allegedly 50 to 60 feet in length, incredibly aggressive and very vicious. Do you think this is a real thing? Certainly there have been things sighted in the ocean that cannot be explained or that were exaggerated. Tales of mermaids, tales of giant octopuses and squid, tales of prehistoric beings. And this falls into that category as well. Could this very easily have been nothing more than an exaggeration? or a misidentification, maybe a very large great white shark that was seen in the shadows that happened to be 25 feet long, or a 50-foot whale shark that actually wasn't very aggressive but was so big and massive that it terrified those who ran into it. It's certainly possible. Is it possible that someone in the Baja region off the coast of California actually saw a megalodon? Something that we think has been extinct for 2.5 million years, but there happens to be one or two or a few of them left around in the ocean. Why not? How do we know that every single one of them are gone forever? That none of them anywhere in the world could have survived? Do you understand the depths of the ocean and how little of it we have been able to explore? And how much we don't know about the ocean? And how we're discovering new things all the time, and things that we think were extinct all the time, and things that we didn't know all the time. I don't rule out any possibility, okay? The black demon shark, it could be misidentification and it just be a whale shark or a large great white that was seen in the shadows or at nighttime, and they thought it was dark. It could be a megalodon. It could be something that we have never seen before. It could be completely made up. But it's a tale that has been passed down for a long time. People have seen something. People have a lot of circumstantial evidence, but no proof. And so it's something that we just can't know for sure. But it's one of these things that I certainly don't rule out, and that I wouldn't be quick to say there's no chance. Is it possible for there to be a black shark that's 60 feet long in the ocean? Of course it is. That thing is huge. That ocean is expansive, okay? We haven't explored it. We don't understand it. We don't know what is down there at the deepest depths of the sea. And this needs to be a movie, okay? Megalodon, the Meg, whatever it was called, was a decent movie. I like shark movies. I'll watch them all. But there needs to be a movie specifically about the legend of the black demon shark, because I would watch it. And it's a good story. And even if it's not real, it's fun. And it makes you think. And it could be real. What do you think, my babies? What do you think, my tools, on this Good Friday? Not like Good Friday, but it's just a Friday that is good. Lowercase g. Is the demon shark real? What are the chances? Maybe I'll throw this as a poll up on Twitter as well. And see what you think. You're smarter than me. We're smarter together. And one thing that I love about those who listen to this show and who interact with us on Twitter is that you have an open mind. You're willing to consider anything, and we consider it together every week. And this week we're going to consider the existence of the black demon shark. That's all for this week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I can't either. It's back in the house and out of the shed for me. Thanks again for listening to episode 51. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and review. It really does help. If you have any paranormal experiences, opinions about sports, or politics that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. Look for us on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, the Good Pods app, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure to follow us on Twitter at InTheShed4. Tune in again next week when we'll hit the headlines, talk some college football, and maybe possibly finally find out if O.J. Simpson actually did it. This has been In the Shed with Wes Anderson, the best news show in the land covering politics, sports, and the paranormal. Have an adventurous and fulfilling weekend. I'll catch you tools later. Peace out, Boy Scouts. Meemaw, we made it!